Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Michael Anthony from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. With me today is John Ventry. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about John, but before I do, remember you're watching America Disclosing Uncensored. Excuse me there. So we're going to leap into the unknown, or what some call, is it paranormal or is it something else? So we're going to probably talk about Bigfoot, some UFOs, the fascinating story behind John, where he's done 5 movies, 38 episodes of different types of shows, such as Hangar One in 2014 to 2015, where he did do 20 episodes, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
He was part of MUFON for nearly 20 years. He was a PA rep for an executive rep for, I'm sorry, was that UPS that you said?
Yeah, UPS. I was an executive there for 26 of my 35 years.
Well, thanks for all the packages getting delivered.
Yeah.
I wish we were still having the same types of service. We're having a little failure in that department.
That's because I'm retired.
Yeah, well, the good goes out with age, and then there's a new generation.
Yeah.
But anyway, you were MUFON. You had 7 states under your belt, and then you also in 2019 they bumped Hangar One back out together. Treated you like crap for doing it the way they do it. But that's the movie. That's the entertainment industry. That's how they look at it, even if there's truth and fact involved. So with me today, again, as I said, none other than John Ventry. And I'm really happy to have you. I'm excited. I look forward to this. I don't know how you want to go right into this, but why don't you, if I missed anything, if you want to give a little bit more of your bio, please do, because I want people to know who you are and how much experience you really bring to the table for all of us and the doors that you've opened.
Yeah. No, I was, I've written 10 books on 5 different subjects, 38 TV episodes, 5 movies. I was very, very creative person. I gave a lot of ideas to MUFON. I was on their board for 3 years. A lot of things they adopted with the journal magazine they put out, and different things that we can do. And like I said, I had 7 states. And a lot of those people still consider me probably one of the best state directors that they've ever had. We built up Pennsylvania. When I took it over, if we had a dozen field investigators, and we got up to the point that we had like 40 field investigators and 178 members, to get the magazine and subscribers. I've put on over 40 conferences. We do Pittsburgh and Philly, and we've done Erie, I think 6 or 7 times, but the attendance there kind of dropped off. And I ran the MUFON Symposium twice, set it all up, got the speakers. So, outside of that, I ran for governor of Pennsylvania. I campaigned for 8 months earlier in the year, from July of last year into early this year. I ran for county commissioner and head of the Republican Party here in Westmoreland County. And, my biggest nemesis with that is the Republican Party. They are turn the other cheek rhinos. They don't like strong candidates. They want controllable, likable candidates who want to hug the Democrats and be a uniparty. And that's not how I view it when you see what's going on in this country. But I don't want to get into the politics. That's another interview. But, there was a point where a lot of people would have considered me.
You don't know how much I love you for saying that, though. You don't know how much I love you for saying. I mean, hey, I'm not going to lie to you. And yeah, we can reflect back to that, and you can come on my other network that I use, which is called America in Crisis, and we can hang out. I do a show right now, Into the Red Zone. A lot of America knows it. We were on last night. We did pretty well. We even had some big entertainers show up onto it to check in with us, to follow. So we know we're all trying to do our best. But yeah, let's give America a break for a good part of the interview talk. Because I don't really look at this as an interview. I look at this, to me, as like, hey, have a cigar with a nice guy. Let's talk about, information that helps and opens more floodgates and doors. Because, I'm 64. You're getting a little older, probably, just to say. And I'm not saying that we're old yet. But, there's got to be a way that we hand off a lot of what we learned, especially you, because you are very well educated in this and you've been in a lot of great places. What I want to bring up is, has anything in your mind, since you did do I think it was Gary Batts that you did a lecture with on the Kecksburg. Has anything in your mind changed on that since now you've, uh, did lectures on it? Are you still favoring the decision that you guys think is proper, or do you have any new ideas from that?
Yeah, that was 2015. Gary Barrett up in Punxsutawney contacted
Barrett,
me.
yes.
Yeah, Barrett. He's a engineer, and he had this theory that Kecksburg was a U.S. spy satellite that crashed. And I kind of blew him off when he first told me that. And then something happened, something I saw in the news, and I think it has to do with objects glowing green in the sky, and that was a big deal in the 50s, the early 50s, or the late 50s. So I called him back and I said, let's go over your theory step by step. I'll critique you. I obviously know the UFO field, you don't. And I tell you what, though, we took Kecksburg and the Stan Gordon video of what happened. So we had eyewitness testimony, and I could look at the DVD. This is what they said. This is what they said. How do you explain this? We went step by step, and I believe we proved that Kecksburg was a spy satellite. It was, a normal cone-shaped satellite that we were launching out of Johnson Island in the South Pacific over Russia to take pictures, because this happened after the Gary Powers incident where they brought his plane down, the U-2 spy plane. And we replaced it with these satellites. And every aspect that we explained, we matched it up, what the satellite would do, what people said. For example, it was coming in, glowing green. And well, how does it glow green? Well, the satellite has a copper alloy heat shield. It would glow green as it heats up in the atmosphere. Witnesses said it had four like jets on it. Well, it had four jets on it. So when it was in the upper atmosphere, it could move and turn, etc. Even the people saying that, well, they saw four NASA people in white radiation suits carrying a box. Well, the satellite had an atomic generator, and they went in the woods and cut it out. People saw blue arcing. They cut that generator out because they couldn't have that radioactive stuff leaking all over. Everything that they said, but so I stick with it that it's it was ours and a spy satellite. A friend of mine just did a real thorough look at it, and he thinks it's still the Cosmos 96 Russian probe. I don't think it was, because the shape of it was more like a 12-foot, 15-foot high water heater with all these things sticking out, and that's not what anybody saw. So I don't believe it was Cosmos 96. Now, the Russians did say something hit Cosmos 96, and I think it was this satellite clipped Cosmos 96, and that's why it crashed in the deep woods of Canada. But no, I stick with it. And I tell you something, we put this together. We gave it to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It was the living section, the front page article on it. And that reporter put it on Stars and Stripes military website. And from that, it was the front page of that too. We got contacted by a guy, and we were able to identify the Army officer involved who headed up the crash and retrieval. And nobody else has been able to do that. Stan Gordon, Unsolved Mysteries, everybody, Sci-Fi Channel, everybody came in here, came and left, but we were able to find the guy. And, but he was told it was the Russian satellite, though. And but that doesn't mean they told him the truth. And an interesting thing was the Sci-Fi Channel and Leslie Kean sued NASA for the evidence box, and they couldn't find it. They just like they can't find the Apollo videos. They couldn't find it. But what this guy told us was, he was his neighbor, and he said, "Yeah, John, he told us that he later went in and he took the box of evidence and destroyed it. He did not want an international incident over Kecksburg. He did this on his own, and he got in a lot of trouble for doing that. He destroyed all the evidence, so that kind of explains, because he was told it was a Russian satellite, so he destroyed the evidence. He didn't want an incident to come of it, and that explains why they couldn't find the any evidence when they searched for it. But no, I think it was a great investigation. We explained every aspect. We identified the Army officer. It does prove that they lied about it because they
Right.
said that they had a couple of Air Force guys. I can't remember if they originally said 2 or 4 that were on the scene, and there was no Army, no NASA, no nothing. But no, we were able to prove that there were about 20, 25 Army guys. There were 2 Air Force and 4 NASA people there, and there was a slew of people there. And even though they denied all of that, but here's the interesting thing with Kecksburg is, you have Project Blue Book at the time because this is 1965, so Blue Book is in place. They never investigated Kecksburg. There's no file, never investigated. What was, considered like a top 5 UFO incident in the field was never investigated by Project Blue Book. So why? I say it wasn't investigated because they knew it was ours. They knew it was a satellite, so they didn't do a UFO investigation. And I think we proved pretty much. And when we did this in 2015, I'm at the height of my fame, coming off of Hangar One for 2 seasons, and people are saying to me, John, you're the one of the most recognized UFO people, and especially in PA, and you're saying it's not UFO. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't think it was UFO. We proved that it wasn't, and I got to go with what the proof tells me.
Well, yeah, definitely. And we thank you for your work. And I'm glad that you got involved with that man. You said Barrett, right?
Gary, yeah, Gary Barrett. Yeah. It's funny. He went by the name of Owen Eichler because he was so
I
afraid.
heard that before. Yeah.
He was so afraid he was going to get knocked off or something was going to happen. And he's up in Punxsutawney, where I've been up there. When I was campaigning, I went up there to meet him, and then I campaigned up there 2 or 3 times for governor. Let me tell you, a stranger comes into town in Punxsutawney, I think everybody knows it.
Yeah. I understand what you mean. Word gets around rather quickly.
Yeah.
So, not to take you off on that, because you gave a really good explanation of a lot of the things there. But it also seemed to me from some of the documents that other people talked about over periods of time that this was actually guided to an area to come down into.
Yeah, well, that's something else we found. It
like
was
remote control, early remote control.
Yeah, when it came over Canada over Detroit, it was heading towards Cleveland, and it turned a little, and then it was heading towards Pittsburgh, and it turned a little more. So I went, Gary and I were digging into manuals that talked about this GE Mark II reentry vehicle, and lo and behold, there's a paragraph written by a general where he said, we're confident we could land this within 100 yards of where we want to land it. And what it had was a weight and balance thing in it. And I guess they sent a radio signal and it would shift its weight. And coming in off of the low Earth atmosphere, the shifted weight would make it turn. Now, it can't make a U-turn, because some people did say that in Kecksburg, that it passed Kecksburg, made a turn, and came all the way back. It can't do that. If it really did that, you don't know with this testimony how much, because it all changes over years. You don't know how much of it is actually the truth. But yeah, we explained that part too, how it was able to turn. It was able, you could change its direction, right, still going straight. Let's say,
Right. Well, that was one of the biggest things out there for sure. And I know you said that you had a location on where you believe it came out of, but did you ever hear of ARTEC?
ARTEC, yeah. What does that stand for? That's not the one under the water, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's part of it. Yes, it's part of a deep.
Off by Miami, right? By the it's in the Atlantic. It's over by the Bahamas, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's on a nice little stash island, and they were actually working with satellite systems back in the day. It was really. I'm not saying that this has any credibility. Yeah. I was just wondering if you heard of ARTEC, because
I did, because when I was with MUFON and on the board, Dave McDonald, who took over with MUFON, he has something in one of those islands there. I think it's a tax shelter, to be honest with you. But he has a scuba diving school, and he was the first one that ever mentioned the Artec. And it's the Roswell, not the Roswell, the Area 51 of the water. Is we do stuff there with Artec in the Atlantic, just like we do at Area 51. But that was first I ever heard of it, and that was probably back in 2013, I'd say.
Yeah, they've been in existence for quite some time. But again, the military industrial complex works on a lot of different divisions
Right.
of new technologies and whatnot, and they're always resourcing. And why some of this information comes on is because we have great whistleblowers who leave places. They wait appropriate amount of time. They start talking about it, or they're at a bar with somebody. They have a few drinks, and they spill a little bit to the public, and things like that occur. And, as we go into the future, more things will always come out. It takes time, but things come out. So getting beyond Kecksburg, I want to ask you, what, out of all the cases that you have come across in your life, doing all these 38 episodes and all these different scenarios where you're putting information out, things that matter. The fact that you had all these years with MUFON, you're getting phone calls, you're getting stories, you're doing reports on occurrences that are happening. You just took a report from me on something you didn't know that happened in Penn. No, you really did. And I'm glad to give it to you. But so what can you share with the community now? Because we have a lot of great people that are just like, hey, I believe this stuff. I'm seeing stuff. And that's why, I went with what's in the skies, because we don't have the answers. What can you tell us that fascinated you? And do you have one particular story as to why you would share it with us?
Yeah, well, one I'll tell you was the best case I investigated, but I want to tell you the best case that interests me on the Hangar One TV series was this case, and I wasn't involved in it, with this girl driving down the street, and something slammed her car numerous times from like both sides. Boom, and the car would shift over, and boom, the car would shift over, and she didn't know what was going on. And when she got to her house, she looked, the car's all dented, right? And they take the car. She contacts MUFON, and they take a piece. Maybe it was the fender or something. They took a piece of the car off. They checked it; it was radioactive. So they took the piece and they brought it to a lab. And now the car's all dented, like I said. So the lab looks at, investigates it, and the MUFON guys go to pick up the report. And when they get there, they're told, "What do you mean? Your people from MUFON came by early this morning and took the part and the lab report." So so there you go. You get, like you Men in Black. Somebody else was onto this, government probably, and they took the evidence and they took the report. But that was a case that just, I believe I got into this believing nuts and bolts UFOs from space, but the more I've been into it, I believe that there's more interdimensional, ultra terrestrial than there is from space. And this is a case of something invisible, cloaked, whatever it was, slamming this girl's car around. Boom, boom, boom. And it's all dented. It's radioactive. I think I'm trying to think if that's the same case, that the way it was dented was almost like heat. Like heat will do something to paint and metal, different than a sledgehammer would do, let's say, but that was an interesting case that really, it got my attention, The best case.
That is actually. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the best case that I got involved in was I became the Pennsylvania State Director in 2007. Maybe it was end of six, something like that. So in 2008, we start getting this UFO wave across the state. And it's interesting. I'm using my laptop. I read every case. I assign them, and I'm seeing these cases coming. People up in East Lake, Ohio, Lake Erie. They're seeing something that they say is coming out of the lake, and it's flying south. So, I get contacted on that. Then I see another case over Wheeling, West Virginia. More cases over Pittsburgh. More cases heading east. So it looks like people are reporting as they see it come down I-79 and across I-76. And the one case, the guy saw it in East Lake, Ohio, and you look at it, and it was maybe 20 minutes later over Penn State College. But then over Philly and Bucks County in particular, we got over 200 reports in a 3 month period. Now, as a state, we were averaging about 93, 95 cases a year. This one particular sighting gave us maybe 270 reports with over 200 in the Bucks County area. And so, everybody got involved here that we had. And Bob Gardner did a good job over there. He was the field investigator. He was living in right in the Bucks County area, a little bit south of it, south of Levittown. And yeah, and he did a great job with it. But so here's what happens. There was two cases in particular. So we're doing this, and then MUFON headquarters contacts me and says, John, we got a TV show, the first ever MUFON TV show, and we got two cases. They're doing 3 episodes. We need another case to do television. I said, okay, let's do this. It's a big case. We're just getting into it at this point. We're a couple of months into it. So, it was good and bad. We got the Discovery Channel. They did a show, UFOs Over Earth. Now, it was good in that the producer, Bob Wise, was the producer of Unsolved Mysteries. So he knew his stuff. He was pretty good. And they were able to pay for some lab analysis and stuff like that. It was bad because you don't want, in the middle of investigation, you really don't want media coverage. You don't want the newspapers. You want to be able to get your interviews done before they get in the middle of it, But the thing hit the news because people were calling the radio, the TV stations, the newspapers, and it was all over Bucks County. There were 4 or 5 news spots, TV stuff. It was in the papers and all of that. But 2 cases in particular, and one you may recognize. I think I did 4 different TV shows and the Anderson Cooper show. I think I'm the only UFO expert in Pennsylvania ever to be on the Anderson Cooper show, 45 minutes interview. But this one was Denise Merter in Levittown. And if you watch any of those old shows, what happened was she got woken up at like 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, and it happened about 5 times. And the dog starts barking. So, she thinks somebody's in the backyard. She opens the curtains. She looks. It's an apartment. She's got a first floor apartment. And she sees a triangular object in the sky. And it's got 3 lights on the 3 corners and a light in the center. And one of the times when it happens, she goes outside, and it's close. She's, I'd say, about 500 feet, probably within 500 feet. It's there. And she says, John, it dropped these metallic sprinkles into the tree in her backyard. She said it lit up like, yeah, you remember that one?
I don't just remember it. I experienced it firsthand. And we talked about this in the green room, me and my daughter.
Yeah. There you go.
It's the prettiest kind of exhaust of energy of something that I've ever experienced. I was like in awe. My daughter, 11 years old, says, and what the hell was that? And I'm like, don't talk like that. And I don't know what it is. And, no, really, this is what triggered me to keep my eyes more bearing to the sky. Yeah, I know about that episode. I truly do. I watched it. And that's why I'm saying what I told you earlier is factual. I can back her up 100%. Yeah. And I honestly, as we're sitting here, I could give you a phone number to call and have nothing to do with it. And you ask this young lady what happened, and the story's not going to change a damn bit, except for the words. She's not going to admit she said it. What the hell was that? She doesn't like to do that. I put her on the spot. But that was fascinating to me.
We got another witness who saw it, whether it was actually hers or in a different location. He was closer, a little further north in Allentown. and he confirmed it. We actually got a few other people that saw this, whether it was that same night or not. But what we ended up doing, what Bob did was he went in the yard, he cut some leaves off the tree, bagged it, tagged it. Then he went to other trees in the yard, in the front of the house, down the street. So he made all these samples up, and we sent it off to a lab. Well, only the tree that Denise said something happened, and we ended up sending it to three different labs. So we had confirmation in three, but it was always her tree, not the other trees that anything happened, right? So it comes back that the leaves were subject to high heat or radiation. They produced a natural enzyme called anthocyanin, but only on those, right? The other
Hmm.
lab report comes back that it had high levels of boron and magnesium, but mostly boron, right? So, it's like nobody has boron in their house.
Right.
I asked Denise, do you got boron in your spice cabinet? She didn't know what I was talking about, but it's like, did you sprinkle it on the tree? No. Boron is used by stealth fighters. It's used in paints and enamels and nuclear reactors. What's that
Right.
doing on a tree? And I asked the lab, I said, is it boric acid from fertilizers? And they said no. If it was boric acid, the report would say boric acid. It's boron, not boric acid. So we have all this proof. Um, there was another lab report. I can't remember what they. There was like they found holes in the leaves, but it was not from insects or anything eating the leaves. So we had some. This is trace evidence. So it's something you don't usually get, in a lot of cases. So we had top-notch trace evidence on that, and then, a couple of months later, Bill Burns and UFO Hunters gets involved, and he lives right there. He's probably licking his chops, on this case, and
Right.
he gets involved, and they took a different approach. We did an episode with UFO Hunters, and they brought in sketch artists and interviewed a lot of the witnesses, and they all described it the same. But I'll tell you this though, that's 2008 into 2009. It was 2008, let's say, and the TV shows that I did ended up, airing in November, the Discovery Channel in January, February for the UFO Hunters. Um, but what I found out later, maybe in 2012, 13, the Aurora Project, the
Yeah.
TR3B,
The Dark Star.
it fits exactly to what she saw.
Right.
So it was a triangular craft with three corner lights and a red center light. It absolutely fit the TR3B, which is our government.
Right.
When we were there, we went to the military base right over there. I can't remember the name of it now, but we asked for an interview and they refused giving us an interview. We told them it would be in the show, would be filmed and all of that, and they said no. But so that's one case with trace evidence. But then there was another case in Doylestown. Cliff, he's a retired contractor, architect, and the guy's really credible. A beautiful house. So we go there, and he has in April and May of '08, his dog starts barking at 4 in the morning. It wakes him up, and the first time he sees this large six-sided object slowly moving in the sky. He said, "John, it can't be going 25 miles an hour, right?" The second time it happens, he wakes his wife up. They go outside. There's a heat lightning storm. So now you got this six-sided object, but when the lightning goes off, you can see through the seams of the object, and it was six triangular craft, or like a pizza pie, let's say, six slice
Right.
pie docked on this thing. And so, again, Bob Gardner, he gets cleared at the Philly airport, and he goes down there and he goes, "Look, this is what we got at 4 in the morning. This is where it's going." They go, they pull it up, and they had a large object with no transponder moving in that same direction on that same time and date. And then they said it veered off and it went to like towards New York to the northeast. That's exactly what it said in the report, and Bob didn't tell her that, So
Hmm.
now we got radar confirmation that there's this gigantic object right by the 10 miles from the Philly airport and a military base and all of that. But then try to get confirmation from the FAA that we got that.
Right.
They kept telling me that it was beyond the record retention period, and we filed like 3 FOIAs. Another one where I disputed the findings. The FAA kept saying we don't have anything. The records have been destroyed. So I contacted the woman at the Philly airport and I put her on the spot and I said, you don't run let me tell you how your office runs, since apparently you don't know. And I said, it's not sitting on your desk anymore after 45 days. You've got it filed in a drawer right below and I really reamed into her because I talked to a guy who knew his stuff about it. And she mails me the disc with a note.
Oh, no
that
way.
She mailed me the disc with a note that I run an efficient office and I do have it, and here it is. Now, the thing is, you can't
Ah,
read this. It's a CD. You can't put it in your laptop. I sent it to Denver to our guy there with MUFON, and he runs it through the Raptor program, and he reads it, and he pulls the screens off with the object with on the screen. It's green. That's how if it doesn't have a transponder, it shows up green. So he pulls that all off. I get back to her and I email her and say, "Well, thanks. We were able to pull 6 screens off of the object with no transponder." Her reply back to me was, "I'm surprised you were able to pull anything off that disk." And I said to myself, "That's a really strange response. You sent it to me. Why would you
yeah.
say that?" But the guy in Denver said, "John, they taped over it. It was corrupted, the disc. They recorded over it,
Ah,
but he said I'm able to pull the layers out, and he pulled it out. So we never did get the FAA to confirm. I got their denial letters, but I got her letter and email, and I have the disc, 2 discs. So I got it. So there you go. You got the government lying, and now we got good
sure.
radar
And you
on
got
it.
the paper trail to prove it.
I got the whole
Did
paper
anything? Were
trail.
you able to? Right. Were you able to look into anything under the Freedom of Information Act, of any other commentary of reports concerning
Well,
this?
we filed FOIAs, and it just kept coming back that there was beyond the record retention period. But the interesting thing
Okay, I'm
though
sorry, I
is,
missed that.
yeah, the interesting thing though is, so we want to do the UFO hunters. We did the show on Discovery, right? UFOs over Earth. So now it's a few months later, Bill Burns and UFO Hunters. So we're filming the Denise episode with him. I'm driving from Pittsburgh to Philly to film that. And we're supposed to do the Cliff episode 3 weeks later on the radar. We're doing the Denise on the trace evidence on the tree. So the woman at the
Right.
airport calls me and says, you could come up now, and I'll do your interview. So I said, let me talk to the producer. So I tell the producer she wants to clear us to come up to the airport and do the interview. And he says, well, I can't. That's a different guy, Kevin Berry, doing that episode. This is John Greenwald doing this episode. So they call the History Channel. I get a call about a half hour later from Kevin Berry, and he says, I got bad news, John. The FAA said that you're not cleared and you're not going up there. And he said, we couldn't do it today anyhow. 20 minutes later, he calls me back again. He goes, I got even worse news now. I said, what happened? He goes, History Channel canceled the episode on the radar. So somebody made a phone call, the FAA, to the History Channel, and this is post 9/11. I don't know what the reasons were, and they canceled the show on the radar on UFO Hunters. So we only did the Denise episode, with Bill Burns. So there's cover-ups with this stuff, and it's whether it's a military, the TR-3B, I don't know, but that to me was the best case I was ever involved in. We had real trace evidence with Denise and radar evidence with Cliff, and that's as good as it gets in the UFO field, other than actually seeing an entity face to face, like the guy behind me over here.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, I get where you're at with so we do have some people out there that might get a little bit confused because you know I guess every once in a while you may see one of these objects, but are they theirs or are they ours? And I would like to say this: I think a lot of the technology that people do see is probably ours. A lot of people
Hmm.
didn't even know about Aurora and the Dark Star and the TRB
Right.
3 and the SR-75 and the Piggyback 74 and the Astra. These were hypersonic style type, and so you're looking up in the sky, and these things can dart across pretty damn fast. You
Yeah.
can identify them as something, but you're not standing up there to conclusively say what it is. So I think there are things out there, and the percentage. That's why you guys do your work. And that's why you were there doing your work. You
Yeah.
probably already take into and weigh some evidence upon. All right, like out of 100%, maybe 90% of this is just like then 10% we got to go through and start really digging to see where truth may lie. So it's a
Yeah.
hard task that you guys have done over the years. It really isn't. Then the suppression, but it seems like you want to say something, but I want to, and I will please, I want you to do that. But I want to know what your thoughts on now, where we're getting these sudden releases of drops of information like the Tic Tac and people coming out and saying, well, it happened. It's a military release from the Pentagon, somehow
Yeah. Yeah.
slipped out.
Yeah.
We're getting articles. It's
I'm going
it's
to tell
on
you a
all the
quick story.
top.
I'm going to tell you a quick story first of being on the Anderson Cooper show, right? So I get nobody from MUFON headquarters wants to do the Anderson Cooper show. They don't want to be put on the spot. I'm on their board, right? So they said, "Well, you're from New York. Why don't you do it? It's the short flight from Pittsburgh." So I said, "I'll do it. I'm not afraid of Anderson Cooper, right?" So here's the cool thing, though. I'm all mic'd up. I got the Denise, and then I got two other females from Kentucky who were abducted. So that's going to be the show. So I don't know who's on the show first, right? Not Abbott and Costello. So it's commercial break, and out walks Fran Drescher, and they're pushing me to go in. I was in third grade with Fran Drescher in Flushing, Queens. And it's like
Oh,
I
really?
see her, yeah, and it's like Fran. We were in third grade together. They pushed me in. I wish my brain had clicked in. She and her husband believed they were abducted. They had a UFO encounter. They believe in UFOs, and they didn't tell me on the Anderson Cooper show that Joe Nickel was there as the skeptic. I mean, if I had some hindsight, I would have told Fran, do me a favor. These girls need your help. They need you to defend them like I'm going to do. Turn around, come back into the show. I'll ask you to say what happened to you, that this stuff is real, because Joe Nickel tried to make these girls seem like they were high on drugs and or drunk or something, with their encounters. But that was, I'll never run into Fran Drescher again. We were in third grade, and but I had a 45-minute interview on Anderson Cooper, and I thought it was fun. It was cool to be there.
Yeah, no, I understand that because, like you, I haven't probably done as much as you have, but I've been affiliated through different things, and where it comes to like, you know, not all Hollywood, but some of it. But nevertheless, all right. So, in the early parts of us getting a connection today in the green room too, you do have a different theory on
Well,
some of
let's talk
these.
about the bits. Let's talk
What is
about the bits and pieces that you had asked me, the crumbs before I interjected. You look at this right now, and you had in I think it was 2017, Tom DeLonge, Academy to the Stars. I think it was
stars?
called. Yeah,
Yeah,
Academy to the
they kind
Stars.
of went MIA.
The whole way this thing came out with a rock star heading it up so the young people would believe in it, very questionable people out of the government involved in this thing. It comes forward, and they issue a public stock. The people are buying 100. I think it was a minimum of $100 or $200 you had to spend on shares, and they accumulate like $5 million, but then they get 35 million in debt, and they go out, the stock goes belly up. The whole thing about it was phony to me. This is the biggest crap I've ever seen as far as disclosure goes. So now you go forward a couple of years, and you got this. Lou Elizondo is the front man now. I don't know what happened to Tom DeLonge, Blink 182. He blinked out. I don't know, but I don't think he's involved in it anymore. You got Chris Mellon, who lives right 10 miles from me. The Mellon family. I had lunch with him. Department of Defense. I told him, how do you know you don't have a high enough clearance? Which he didn't like, because he said it's not ours. I said, well, maybe you don't have the clearance to know. But
Yeah.
so you got this thing, and there was a FOIA request to the Department of Defense on Lou Elizondo to tell us about this ATIP program. So the FOIA request comes back, and it says that we have no records of any ATIP project with Lou Elizondo. So who is this Lou guy? What's he saying? What's he making up? So here's, I think, the more well. Then you get the congressional hearings a couple of months ago. Navy
Right.
guys, some official from the Navy made a comment that, uh, you know, anybody making up UFO stories they think should be prosecuted, that they want to handle the investigations, right? So then you get an article, an interview, I think it was with the New York Times with Lou Elizondo in September, about a month ago. And the title is Lou Wants to Blow Up Ufology. And in it, he says, I want to kill the UFO field. It's a lot of bunk. It's a lot of made up stories. He doesn't name MUFON, but he says, and none of this should be investigated by private groups, private individuals. And again, anybody making up, and there is a lot of embellishment. When you dig into these cases, the people want a little bit of fame and fortune, and the story changes, and it gets better and better with the years, so he says he wants to really just have the government scientists do the investigations like Blue Book, and no private people confirming the facts and holding them accountable. And it was up to him. There would be no groups like MUFON, and and if you and I are on this
But
show,
they'll figure out oversight committees. They always do. And then they
yeah, but
interject, and then they knock that program on. And then it turns
right,
to a new name. And then they knock that program on.
but
And we're following new paper trails. What's the
yeah,
matter with citizens who that have interest? That burns me up for comments
yeah,
like
well,
that to be made. I don't have any disrespect to the guy, but for him to come out and say like that we need to stand down, that's a bunch of bullshit in my mind.
I agree
You're
with you.
either in this, you're in it to win it with us, or go get the hell out of the picture,
Yeah, but you know what it
because
does?
the American people want answers about these things.
Yeah, but they want full control, like communist China. They want full
Right.
control of the narrative and all of that. And sorry, we live in America still, I think, where you have freedom of the press, which you can't trust them either. But you have free speech, and I can investigate the case if I want to, and I'm a real good investigator. But it just struck me. But it goes a little deeper than that. Uh, there was a couple of guys. Mark McCandlish was supposed to testify in 2020 at these, in front of Congress, right? Or maybe it was 2021, right? And he had some information, I have a whole list in a presentation I do of different things that he was going to talk about, stuff he witnessed. He commits suicide like 2 months before the hearing. This would have been a key witness, but his girlfriend, friends, all of them say the guy was not suicidal. He was making plans, all of this stuff. So there's a dark side to all of this. And I'll tell you this, and
Very.
I don't think I'm going out on a limb. Uh, them wanting to control the narrative. What did they do with NICAP back in the late 60s or early 70s? They got the leadership of NICAP removed. what was that major's name? Not O'Keefe. I can't think of his name now. But they took it over with their own CIA people, and they paid them salaries and tremendous expense accounts. They bankrupt NICAP. So the comments from the Navy and Lou Elizondo, I believe they want to either knock out MUFON or take it over the leadership of it and control it, and they'll bankrupt it. And MUFON right now is actually pretty financially secure. It wasn't 10 years ago when I was on the board, but they've done pretty good with the TV shows and other things they're doing, and they raised their prices, so they're actually financially secure. But now you think about that. They took out NICAP. You got these other investigators, and there's always been the UFO investigators die early. I give a presentation on that. Who's killing the ufologists, right? Their lifespan is not as long as other people. They have suicides, fast-acting cancers, poisoned, shot twice in the head, not, twice. So it's very strange.
Stop windows on your day home. You're getting released from the hospital.
Yeah, but
it goes back. But I mean, it always seems to have these political consequences, and I'm just going to say it. What is this? It's a political issue. And these congressional things, they were supposed to be releasing like every 30 to 90 days. They were supposed to have update reports for the public, and that pretty much fell apart. They put a Band-Aid on it and say we're gonna give them an extension. They don't give anybody extensions.
I wouldn't believe anything they tell you anyhow. They're not going to tell you the truth. There's no reason for them to tell you the truth. But here's the other thing.
No, but they can't take the truth from me. They can't take the truth from me. I know what I saw. I know what I experienced, and it's people like us who have to keep coming to the forefront, saying this is there is something else to this, without a doubt, and it's not a made up topic. Are they interdimensional? Are they outer dimensional? Is it from a different reality source? As I said a little earlier, a parallel universe. I want to get into that with you now because you have some things on that.
I want to make one.
If we don't have enough time today to go over everything, we can come back and do more. Yeah. I'm a battle artist at this stuff.
I say that the head of MUFON, Jan Harzan, he's no longer the head of MUFON.
Yeah.
Right. I believe that this group, whether it was maybe not Lou, whoever's behind the scenes, that they set Jan Harzan up. They entrapped him. They got him removed from MUFON. And they're going to try the same thing with Dave McDonald, who's the head of MUFON right now. I think they're going to try to knock him out too, and they're going to get their person in charge of the organization. I believe that they targeted those guys,
There's a lot of targets on a lot of people when they get too close to anything. That's why they shut down your show. Then not only your show got shut down, look, Project Blue Book, it may have had some facts put into it from, paperworks or documents that they were able to obtain as they created that show. But it's the minute it got really interesting and the minute it started to narrate around military bases and more, it vanished. And now I'm waiting for that to happen, like with Skinwalker Ranch. How much information is going to be too much? Are they going to just out of nowhere just decide to cancel? Well, right now they have a very wealthy person who is, doing the best that he can to, keep the face of Skinwalker Ranch alive and the information and data being collected from it. I don't see any way for us to be able to really protect ourselves against something that's so much bigger, except for to continue, even if we have to continue in silence, and do it as citizen journalists.
I got Paul Hynek coming to Philly in May next year as a speaker to talk about.
Really? You got Hynek's kid coming?
Yeah. And then I'll try to get him to Pittsburgh the following year. But I got Paul Hynek coming to the MUFON conference.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Well,
I think his
dad had some memoirs.
Yeah, I think I also have Dr. Taylor from Skinwalker Ranch coming to Philly. He told Nick Pope he'll do the show. He'll come to Philly. He's waiting on his schedule. So, I say I got Dr. Taylor from Skinwalker, but he hasn't with me confirmed. I'm still waiting for that final
Right.
confirmation. Well, Heineck and Taylor, two pretty
Yeah.
good ones, you know.
Yeah, they are. They
Yeah,
are. I mean, they're very strong voices for the community, without a doubt. All right. So, what do you think
and
about
Nick,
this parallel universes and all that stuff? Because I mean, look, these things can manipulate uh, anything they want. They can turn on a dime. Do you think that they're remote controlled? Is it fallen angels? Is it aliens that we don't understand, of interdimensional light beings of some sort that are
yeah,
capable of withstanding um, restrictions of our reality, because we know our planes can't do it. I mean, everybody says your head will just blow up and all that, and I do believe
yeah,
that these are true facts that can occur. But
yeah,
we hear about this. We have pilot reports. We have endless documentations. Motherships over Alaska, ships going in and out of water, where even a president witnessed it happening. You got presidents who witnessed, including Reagan, and I'm going to go with his name because I'm a believer of his integrity and honesty,
yeah,
because of how he represented America and more, and the consequences that he suffered even while doing it and
yeah,
enduring it. And he always warned us about this other side of the darkness that we deal with within, the military-industrial complex. It's basically just crushing us to pieces, and from so many different angles, under so many different topics.
yeah.
What are your true thoughts on what you see, what you understand? Could there be something different? Because now CERN's coming out where paperworks are being shared, where they have now reached a spot with their experiments of CERN where they have opened up a line with something that shows there's an intelligence that exists in this reality, but it's a parallel reality with us of its
Yeah.
own universe.
Yeah. Well, let me first say this. Nick Pope will be here in Pittsburgh. If you want to come out to the April conference, we got Nick Pope. But
Yeah.
as far as your question goes, I started out as, I was 41 before I got involved in UFOs. I knew nothing about the field. I joined MUFON in 98. I knew nothing at that point in 98. And I didn't know anything about the field. So I bought into the nuts and bolts. They're from outer space. They fly. They got to be from space, right? So I bought into it. But now, after 24 years of experience, I don't buy into the outer space at all. As a matter of fact, I question whether there is even life in space because of how hard it is to get a planet that has everything right in order to have intelligent, life on it. But I absolutely believe that there are other dimensions tied to planet Earth, and it's all tied to this planet. There are other dimensions, and these things come true through. And it's almost like they can come in for a while. I don't know how much energy it takes. They dissipate. They got to go back. But I see this thing as being, in my mind, more interdimensional than being extraterrestrial. I believe that 100%. And it's funny, Jacques Vallée, he doesn't say it, but
Great man.
yeah, he basically says he gives you 8 reasons why they can't be from space, and everything you read tells you he's saying it's interdimensional, and he's not saying it, but there's a malevolent. I won't say demonic. There's a malevolent side to this. John Keel said the same thing. Hynek, in the end, said he didn't think they were from space. He said he thought they were interdimensional. Dr. John Mack. There's a whole list of people who moved away from outer space to interdimensional because physics-wise, it makes sense and it's possible, But I'll tell you a quick story. I don't know how much time we got left, but I'm
whatever
doing
you want.
Yeah,
this is
I'm
fun.
doing,
Whatever you want to do.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing the Hangar One show. We're filming it. It's airing in 2014 and 2015, right? So, lo and behold, as this thing airs in 2014, it airs in February. In June, something shows up in my house, and it's malevolent. Banging on the wall, picture flipping up, my dog kind of going after it, going upstairs, barking crazy up the attic like something's there. There's a column of rotting flesh in the hallway. You step back, you don't smell it. You step forward, you smell it. There are
Hmm.
bangs on the wall that both me and the dog turn our head. It was so loud. I mean, it was like a sonic boom, is what it was. And my daughter, they don't live with me, obviously. I got divorced, so they're living in Jersey. But my daughter comes over and she gets attacked by shadow people. She sees them all around her bed. One completely presses into her body. She hears all this conversation in her head. And my son and his fiance are in the next room. And the one shadow person in the doorway says, "When you're done with her, I want to try out the other two." She wouldn't make that type of wording up like you're test driving a car. They want to see what it feels like to be inside a human, because they're, I don't know, interdimensional. They have no physical bodies and stuff. I see one morning, I wake up at 5 a.m. and I look down the hallway and there's somebody standing there. He's taller than the door frame is 6'8". His head is above the door frame. It's standing there like this, frozen. Long arms, long legs. The waist can't be more than 18 inches. Long arms and legs like the Shadow Man. The creature, the paranormal thing, and he's backlit.
Right.
The attic door is open and he's backlit, so I could see the silhouette. I can't see the face, but he's got a square head. I'm looking at it. It's a square head. So I'm thinking, is this an alien? Like, is it wearing a helmet? The head is square. And I mean, it's there. It's there for minutes. I'm like rubbing my eyes. I'm slapping my face. I crawl to the footboard. So now I'm 6 feet closer. I'm looking at it. And I say, well, it's there. Step over the football board, charge it. You're taking kickboxing, hit it and send it back to where it came from, right? As soon as I had that thought in my head, it's like a voice in my head said, you don't want to do that. That could be unsafe. Step off the side of the bed and put the light on. And I followed and I did that and it's gone. But I go down the hallway. My Doberman is sound asleep at the top of the steps. I walk past them. I'm looking for footprints. I go up the attic. I walk back. He's sound asleep. You can't walk past a dog without him turning and acknowledging you. They are light sleepers. You can't walk past a dog, right? So it's almost like, with abductions, how the wife gets abducted and the husband sleeps through the whole thing, I don't know what that was, and it goes on for 22 months from June of 14 to April of 16. I'm bringing priests into the house, 2 priests, blessed coins, because I'm feeling this thing is malevolent, it's demonic, and I then start researching all of the alien abduction stories, Carla Turner, Betty Andreesian, all of these people, and I read their books, and I say, look at that, smell of sulfur. The footsteps that I hear, my dog hears it. You hear the claws across the tile floor, and the dog's looking at it. Like, what is that? His head's just turning like that. We don't see anything. And so I started looking into a lot of these famous cases. I said, these things, it's interdimensional, and I believe it's demonic. I think the alien abduction to me is the return of the Nephilim. They're there for the DNA, and with the women to take the fetus, all of that stuff. But it's not aliens. I think it's a different program going on, a hybrid program, and to infiltrate the government. And when you look at the Democrats right now, you could say they've been infiltrated because there's something wrong with that party,
Well,
But
they bow to something. There's no doubt about it.
I agree, and it ain't God. It's not God.
Yeah. Our research says that they are very satanic, so it does fit. It's just, how does it fit? And is it a direct connection? Do they know more than we think? We've been experimenting, spending billions and billions and trillions of dollars. We didn't get into all this debt from nothing, and it wasn't all because of wars. Benefit, the rich benefits from the wars. So where did the taxation of the money go? And it's supported all these projects. Look at Phil Schneider. Look at his story. And now I can't say that it actually happened, but it's rather intriguing when you look at like things that are documented where guys come out and actually have good representation. However, when you go to dig into his story, there's a lot of material data that's not there. But he swears up and down on it. He knew about the Aurora projects. He knew about building underground. He was an expert at it. It's a fascinating story, but so was Benny Barney Hill, and then you got reversed where they reversed hypnotic regression, and brought a lot of good clinical information.
Phil Schneider was murdered. Think about that. You know what I said a half hour ago about ufologists getting killed. Phil Schneider was strangled with like piano wire. That's a fact. He was
piano
murdered.
Wire. Yeah, without a doubt, and they covered that up too.
Well, let me tell you something else.
But the funny part is there are people that will know. We just need them to come forward. I mean, his body had to go somewhere. Somebody had to deal with it. Somebody would have to make notations. Even let's say somebody did their job handling his body afterwards. Somebody knows something. We just need people that know something to come more forward on these particular types of things, because that's always been a paper trail, and where's it always go back to?
Well,
everything we're fighting right now.
A couple of things. I contacted the pilot who saw the Tic Tac. Fraser was his name, Frasor, I think it was. And I said, do you want to come? Do you want to come to either Pittsburgh or Philly? I do 2 conferences, and tell us what you saw. His response was, I don't want to be associated with UFO conferences and aliens, right? I said, oh, okay, so he doesn't do conferences. I speak to Chris Mellon, who's TV. He don't want anything to do with MUFON, UFO conferences, anything like that. I speak to Chris Mellon, who's 10 miles from me, and I said, come by. We're at the college. We do the conference at the Westmoreland Community College. Come by 15, 20 minutes. Just give us an update. People would love it. Nope. I don't want to do UFO conferences. So now this Lou Elizondo, last month in that article, makes a statement that people are going to find something like that. They're not. What you're going to find out in the public is that they're not aliens, but they're our neighbors. They're not monsters. He said they're our neighbors. What the hell does that mean? They're our neighbors. Is he saying there's another species on the planet under the ocean? What neighbor? Or is he saying that interdimensional? Would interdimensional make them our neighbor because they could be right around us and invisible? But he's clearly saying they're not from space. And every interview I've seen with this group, when you bring up aliens and flying saucers from space, they just back away. And they're telling you it has nothing to do with aliens and outer space. So who is flying this technology? He says it's our neighbors. And, it makes me wonder about Atlantis. Is there a amphibian humanoid species on this planet that lives under the ocean? When you look at trade routes, ships go straight, from Chile to Africa. Mm-hmm. They don't go in that whole area in the south, huge part. Same thing with planes. You have flights, New York to London, right? You're not flying all the way on the bottom of the planet, and up. There could be anything going down under the ocean. We actually know more about space than we know about the ocean floor.
Bingo.
So what
I was just going to say that, yeah.
What does he mean by these craft that we see are our neighbors? It's certain it can't be Russia and China. What is he talking about?
Well, to me, it's confirmation that there is an existence of something, of an energy, of a presence, of consciousness,
but it's terrestrial.
Of intelligence.
It's terrestrial, though.
I agree. No, I agree. But I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they manipulate it, but I do think technology comes from these people. We jump too far, and I'm copycatting here, but like so many like Dolan and people have said, how do you take this giant leap in 100 years? How do you take it? And then you have to go back and actually really reconsider everything that we've learned from the old school boys, you know, and Bob Lazar and Element 15. And he didn't work for anybody, but yet
Right.
somehow he was one of the only ones that somehow survived with a story that went public. And I think by him going public and having a loud mouth protected himself.
Right. A lot of times that's the best way is to go public, go to the media, and then they can't just knock you off and get rid of you, you know. But it's very strange. So in my mind, in following this now, they've confirmed it's not extraterrestrial. I what I encountered in my house in the 2 years that I was on the Hangar One TV show, to me this was interdimensional and it was malevolent. So I'm not a big believer in the outer space thing anymore. And, you know, it's funny, the longer I'm in this field and I talk to people that have been doing it 15, 20, 30 years, a lot of them say, yeah, John, I think it's interdimensional. This outer space just doesn't make sense. The distances to travel, the energy needed, all of that. So I don't know. I don't know what to think, you know. And then you look at, like I said, my encounter was malevolent. The whole alien abduction thing is malevolent to me. You know, they're taking these fetuses, they're kidnapping women mostly. You know, the whole thing is a human rights issue, and it's totally malevolent. But it's the same thing in the Bible with the Nephilim. You know, whether they were the sons
Right.
of demons, you know, of fallen angels that mated, or they're some interdimensional entity. I don't know. But, you know, think about it, heaven and hell are interdimensional, right? So when you say it's
Right.
interdimensional, right away you open the door for me to say, well, it's copying the Nephilim and it's malevolent. And who knows? You know, what would be the weirdest thing? I should write a sci-fi story. Does Satan have an air force? Are these UFOs
I think
belong
he
to
does.
Lucifer? Think about it. He has
I do.
a mirror planet of Earth where Hitler won, and they have flying saucers, right? UFOs, and but they are able to come through the dimension with it, but they got to go back because of the energy that's needed. It dissipates, whatever. What if they have a parallel world? Hitler's in charge, and it's actually them. It's demons. It's fallen. The children of the fallen angels are in charge of another mirror Earth. Who knows?
Well, you know, Corey Good used to talk about things like this, and then he went MIA, and
Yeah,
others. But I mean, but what is under the Antarctic? Well, you know, we've had whistleblowers come through Linda Moulton Howe and describe things from under the ice, rooms of basalt with no supports, with natural lighting, with um, like conditioned rooms and more. And what was with this Ark of the Gabriel or whatever, the Ark of Gabriel that made it up there, and the Pope had to send all these things to the Antarctic for a special type of ceremonial thing on how to handle it because it was of weaponry. You know, we can theorize over so many different aspects of so many different things, but I truly think that the description of what occurs within abductions and cattle mutilations and these sonic booms, also I call them skyquakes,
yeah,
because I get them a lot. I get them a lot in Pennsylvania, especially up on my mountain. I'm at the crest lake of a mountain on one of the highest peaks, second highest elevation in Pennsylvania. And I'm telling you, it's a plateau of a radar. But what they do to me up there is they cloak the skies constantly with this material that they
mm,
call it's all. And I think it really is serving multi-purposes. It can be a weapon. It can deliver anything. It can also not let you see everything that's going on because they don't want you to see everything. Why do you need to do something 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days? If we're having a climate crisis and we're overheating, what does that have to do in the Northeast? Save our money, save our tax dollars, give these people Paris Accord less, and stop spraying up here. Letting it, you know, I can understand fighting a battle when it's happening, but you know, as seasons change, so do I. In my mind, just like the song goes,
yeah,
it should be unnecessary. But these guys are cloaking the moon at night now. They're
yeah.
going right in front, like the same as they do to the sun. They put those big X's up there, and sometimes it's stars, and sometimes it's circular. but now they're doing that over the moon as well at night. So I never
Yeah.
know how. I think I had 3 days this whole summer where I had night clarity, where I was able to pick up, movements in the sky, unexplained movements. And you brought up something very good too, that like the portal of energy or something, where I was picking up 6 to 7 somethings. I can't even call them crafts because I can't, but I was seeing them just appear and then going about their way. And they, one at a time, showed up in this one area, always showed up in this one area, always. And then I'd be watching it 2 minutes later. And I'm not saying it was like clockwork, but as I watched and observed, I believe it was 6 to 8 came out of this one area and just like went about its business. But they were
Yeah.
also functioning much different than what we see that a normal satellite can do. Satellites don't make movements as these did because I watched them do Z's. I watched them go back up just like jet straight and then dart back. And it was like, whoa, whoa. That is not of anything that we understand. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I wonder when you see the X in the sky, if they're not warning the UFOs away, that we know you're in the area, and the jets go and put an X in the sky, to tell them to leave. Maybe it's a warning, but you got to believe with the whack jobs that we have in charge, that they're going to start seeding the sky to reflect sunlight away and try to cool the planet, which is going to be a total disaster because you can live in a warmer climate. You cannot live in an ice age. You will take out North America and Europe and Russia, if you get a mini ice age like we had 500 years ago. And that's the whole thing that nobody, I saw something yesterday. They're trying to remove from textbooks and articles and everything online that there was a medieval ice age from 1350 to 1850. It doesn't fit the man-made global warming narrative that we had an ice age and now we're warming up since 1850 to get back. But if you actually look it up, we are cooler now than any period in the past other than that mini ice age, right? We're warming up naturally.
And from our ice samples, the cores, 2 mile cores, scientifically, before all this shit started to really hit the fan, we were able to see that we were just going through a natural element of what the Earth does. And this planet seems to be pretty normal. And that's why we have scientists even coming out. They get invited on and they challenge these people now, but not all of them. Because you got to understand, where science works, money works, which means grants work, which means the government has its hand in it, which means then it's suppression. So it's controlled by the hand. That's why they invest and they expect something back from their investors. And that's why so many people are now saying this is a must do. We must have it. It must happen. I mean, let's face it. Obama built a $12 million home right off the water. Why would he build a $12 million home right off the water if Al Gore was so correct in his theory? It's never happened. I think we went up a half of an inch in 20 years. It's never happened. And I'm not saying that we don't need to do things better. We need to do things better on Earth. But they don't focus around the fact that we have a pool of plastic and syringes sitting out in the middle of the ocean that needs cleaned up the size of Denmark or, the size of New Hampshire. But nobody's out there doing nothing about it. They're letting it lay. They talk a good story, but they deliver nothing when it comes to that.
It's all disinformation. I have a chart that shows the climate going back, and we're the coolest period in 500-600 AD. It was 2-3 degrees warmer. In when Jesus was here 2,000 years ago, it was 3 degrees warmer. The Minoans 4,500 years ago, it was 5 degrees warmer. And then you have that it's warming up. You have the ice age brings it down, and we're starting to come back. It's a perfect graph showing that this is natural, but these crazies won't acknowledge it. Al Gore lied about this whole thing. He knew we were warming up naturally, and he turned it into man-made global warming. And now they say
Yeah.
call it climate change. Well, you're true, it's climate change, but it's natural. Even when you look at the carbon, they say, whoa, you got to get rid of cars, right? We're going to go to electric vehicles. We got to get rid of cattle because they fart and it's methane. So, you look at the amount of carbon in the atmosphere based on their formulas, we got like 400 times more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than correlates to the temperature right now. We should be 20 degrees warmer right now based on the amount of carbon we've put in the atmosphere from technology and cars and factories, but it hasn't happened because when God created Earth, it has a system of self-correction and it pulls it
Right.
out. Plants grow bigger, takes the carbon. Earth, there is no Mother Earth, but Gaia, the Earth takes care of itself, and the whole thing is a lie. And it's funny. I don't know what's a bigger lie, climate change or evolution. I don't believe in evolution.
Both.
It's again a total freaking lie that we came from these chimps and apes, and that other creatures go from cold-blooded to warm-blooded. Dinosaurs, right? Turned into birds. Well, how do you go from cold-blooded to warm-blooded? How do you have 46 chromosomes? Apes have 48. The whole thing is another lie. It's a way of life now of evolution, and evolution is not true. There are no fossil finds of things transforming into something else. There aren't. It's a big lie, and it's like global warming. It's the whole thing is a lie, but all these young people buy into it and they believe it heart and soul.
Well, I mean, I think they were able to scientifically prove a few things where it came to how evolution worked within different species besides man.
That's not evolution.
However, maybe
That's variance in the genes. That like you could take all the dog breeds are variants. It's not evolution. Dogs came from wolves. That's not evolution. It's and even says in the Bible of the same kind. It's variance in
nine,
the
yeah.
genes. Right. You can't get a dog and a cat to mate, right? It doesn't work. A bear and a lion can't mate. It has to be in your genes. Just like you got six races, I guess they claim, right? Blacks and whites can mate because you're the same. But you can't mate with a giraffe. It's a different species. So they call everything
Well,
evolution. You got blue eyes, I got green eyes. Well, see, you evolved. That blue eyes evolved. No, it's always been in the genes. It just comes out.
yeah, but I do, theoretically, I understand where you're at, and it makes a lot of sense. It really does. Um, but when we look at certain things, there's been facts of how giraffes and certain dinosaur species had changed over like 100,000 years. Now, again, was I force fed information that was bad? It's possible because what you
Yeah.
say does make a lot of sense, um, especially when you go between cultures. It doesn't matter
Right.
what culture you are. If you're going to have sex with somebody and you impregnate, it's successful. And that's why I think the Germans were, they threw $10,000 at a professor of science to do his very best. And of course, it was the worst case scenario of the Germans who were doing this, the satanic ones, and they were known for practicing satanic things. They gave $10,000 for him to try to impregnate with a monkey to a woman, and then so back and forth. And so it's not like our hands weren't weren't deep diving into trying to do and work with this mRNA and change the DNA
Yeah.
to create. And that's where Bigfoot comes in a way. I mean, if you really think about it, maybe somebody more superior, and I do believe we had very superior group that was here. Where did they go? I don't know, but I mean, we know when we look at the mega buildings and all this different structures and how far back we go, and the fact that we find tools that are embedded into a rock, a petrified piece of wood that turns to rock. They can date it 100,000 years ago. So there's a lot of stuff out there that I weigh in on, but it doesn't mean I have all the answers. But that's what keeps me functioning is who Michael is and why I stay so much into it. But
Yeah.
I can
Well,
agree to
let me tell you a couple of things.
disagree with you as gentlemen and on some of the factors.
Okay, radiometric dating doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work because once you jumble up things with hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, you can't date an
It's
area. And
contaminated.
I'll give you an example. Mount St. Helens, 1980. They went back
Right.
in 1995 and radiometric dated it, and it came back between 340,000 and 1.3 million years old. So that's why you can't trust that. But the bigger point is if you believe in creation and God, we were created, the planet and us were created aged and whole. So when God created the planet, everything was already aged thousands of years for it to work, to be radioactive, to be cold, to be whatever it is. He put it there. And the best example is the chicken or the egg. What came first? Remember, we'd say, I can't figure this out. The chicken, because he created the chicken aged and whole, and it had an egg. Just like Adam and Eve were teenagers, they could have children. They didn't have, they didn't come from goo and somehow survive because no human would survive. We're not self-sufficient for the first 10 years, 6 years. We'd never survive. But here's the philosophical question with all of that stuff, because I have more of a creation view. If creation is true and evolution's not true, which I don't think it is, and I could blow a whole hole in the evolution thing, how do you have life in space? If the people who believe in aliens from space have to believe in evolution, you cannot have aliens in space unless the whole evolution story is true. And that's why I say it's interdimensional. I don't believe there's life in space. I don't believe evolution's true. I believe we were created and everything centers on Earth. That's my belief.
Well, you've done a lot of homework. You come to your own conclusions. When you come to my platform, this is all about happy debate. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
it's okay if in some instances where people agree to disagree. But the best part of that agree to disagree is the fact that we have respect for each other and our views, and what you share is educational. It's
yeah,
knowledge, and I accept it. And that's where I really feel bad because I see a lot of groups just fight amongst each other these days about things that make no sense that they need to fight about. The only thing that is important is the information. How you weigh it is not so well looked at with some people, and
yeah,
that's sad. But like for me, I can talk about anything with people, and I think that's like my baby train. I mean, I love information and knowledge, and because now I'll probably go sit and think about what we talked about and
yeah.
reanalyze some of the things that I've thought about for the last 40 years. And that's not a joke. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Because to me, I got to put it into focus so I can write it into my catalogs,
Yeah,
because
the
that's
whole
when I'm dead and gone, that's going to be my story.
yeah, the whole UFO field has got me to think this way. If I never got involved in UFOs back in '98, and I was supposed to be, I was an executive with UPS, but I was supposed to be in Atlanta, not Pittsburgh, and I'd be golfing now when I'm retired with the other executives. But my son says that because I turned down a huge promotion for my wife, and so he says, "But Dad, you would have never wrote these books. You would have never been on TV. You would have never done this research." But my research into UFOs has made me a reborn Christian. And I look at the abduction thing as absolutely malevolent. I really do. And that's why I believe the interdimensional is true, you know. But the UFO field it's a long journey that's got me to think this way now. Plus, what was in my house, I'm telling you,
Right.
what was in my house was interdimensional and malevolent. It absolutely was.
Let me get an opinion from you. Stephen Greer talked a little bit about this, and a few other people that have, some of the bigger name people. I'll put it that way. What do you think about Roswell? and the fact that a lot of people talk of the things that were found, maybe not found, and the fact that there was more than craft
Yeah.
that
Well,
went down.
yeah, I have a different theory. I have a different in my book, the string theory of the unexplained. I have alternative theories for everything. In my mind, Roswell was what happened was in 1936 there was a UFO crash in the Black Forest of Germany. Now, whether that was an interdimensional craft, however, wherever it came from, it crashed. Hitler got it. That's documented as much as we have documentation, right? So they didn't know what to do with it back in 1936. You didn't even have a door that opened. They don't even know how to get in the thing. There's no windows. So, so if you follow that line of thinking, and you know that the Nazis were doing experiments with jet engines, rockets, V2. They had the Bell. They were doing time, whether that was time travel or interdimensional travel or anti-gravity travel. They had all of this stuff. And Project Paperclip in 45, we got all of those records from Kammler. We got them. So my theory is, the Germans had the Hanabu, right? They had those UFOs that looked like they flew. They couldn't control them, the red mercury, all of that stuff, right? So 1945, we get all of this, and we get the scientists, right? So 1947 with Roswell at White Sands, right, where we do all of this stuff, we tested one, and it crashed. I think that Roswell was the testing of the technology that we now have today that you're seeing in the skies as as Trump's Space Force that has really been here since 1980, functioning very well over Phoenix, the Phoenix Lights, and the one in New York, Hudson Valley. That was ours. That was ours back in the 80s. And so that's my...
Okay, so then... All right, what about then the battle over Los Angeles? How does that make any sense or fit?
The Battle of LA to me was the start of the UFO field, modern era, not Roswell. And I argue that with people. You look at the Battle of LA, right? You just look at the picture they have. You got the dome-shaped craft, 9 lights, and the lights hit it. So it tells you it's there. Because those lights they don't keep going, they hit the object. You see anti-aircraft fire all around it, right? They fired 1,433 shells. Couldn't bring it down.
Bingo.
Right? So what was the Battle of LA? The first time we fired on a UFO, the first time we denied the existence of UFOs, and the first time that we said it was a weather balloon, right? They said it was a weather balloon. The same excuses that we gave in Roswell, that it's a weather balloon. So to me, Battle of LA was absolutely, even with the Foo Fighters in World War II, what were they? Those orbs of light, of energy, observing probably something interdimensional, recording and observing this huge battle, But the Battle of LA to me was the best UFO case and the start of the modern era.
What do you think about I think it was in 1890 or
1896, the airships?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a strange thing when you look at the UFO field. It fits the era and culture that it's in. So in 1896, and even in India and other places, it was more like flying balloons, which we didn't have back then. These airships that were being seen. And, if you go to India, their aliens are red-skinned. Why? Because Shiva is red-skinned, right? The grays, this guy behind me, that's an American thing. You don't get grays in South Korea. You don't get grays in Japan. That's an American thing. They don't exist in these other countries, and the older sightings, they kind of match what you would understand them to be. So I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I still say it's interdimensional. I don't know, but that was a good case with the one in 1896. That's the one that hit the the windmill thing, the tower, and it crashed, and they buried
Yeah.
the alien. So that was a
And
cool
well,
case. We had
supposedly it got buried in the cemetery, but no one could find it, and the
well,
tombstone went missing,
well,
and
get this.
more. And then and more
MUFON,
happened actually.
yeah, MUFON did an investigation on it, maybe in the 80s or 90s, and they filed a writ of exhumation. The
Yeah,
following
to
day, when they
exhume.
went, you exhume. The following day, when they went back, the tombstone was gone, and the
Right,
thing was,
right.
it was dug up, and the tombstone's gone. So when they filed to look at the area, everything disappeared. So again, somebody got there before us. We were going to dig it up,
Mhm.
get the writ, dig it up, and get the bones. And somebody took it and they removed the headstone, so you don't even know where it is now. Unless you had a good memory.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
well,
that was a good
there's
case.
even more reports. There's even more reports that go back older than that. And then if you look at biblical
Yeah,
artwork and more, where it's in pictures, there are crafts depicted that look like what anybody would call a UFO. What we
yeah,
understand a UFO to look like,
yeah,
they are already in these, and a lot of paintings. I would say at least 18
yeah,
paintings that I'm aware of that exist worldwide. They have this, and then you have other signs of things in technology from down in the dry sand, Syria and
yeah,
Egypt and Jerusalem, and these in the burial chambers where things are left on the walls, and pictures are depicted, and crafts made of gold, and people are duplicating them, and they fly. So
yeah.
to me, it just says that there was brilliance here beyond what we understand. And I think the pyramids were used for much different things than what people think they were.
Right.
Everyone they were about tombs, and I say that because I've been taught it, yes,
Yeah,
but I learned to accept knowledge, and I love being schooled. But when I do my own homework on it too, and do private readings and ratings and articles and so forth, it brings you to conclusions that there were civilizations way beyond us, and even older than Göbekli Tepe. I know that's kind of like a key focal point where people go back as the one of the oldest, but there's actually that we're finding out even more older. But you don't get any media reporting on anything.
yeah.
We're stuck in that area. Maybe
You
that's
know
why
what's
Lou Alessandro's writing this crap that he's writing right now. I don't know.
Yeah, who are our neighbors, right? But what's funny? What you brought up was the reason I got into UFOs in '98. In '96, I started writing my first book on the Mayan calendar based around 2012. And when I was doing my research of end time prophecies by culture, I kept coming across writings talking about people, star people, sky people, people on flying shields. I knew nothing about UFOs. I watched the X Files. I was a horror fan. I knew nothing. So when I'm writing that book, I said, you know what? I'm gonna join that MUFON thing because I saw it on the X Files, and that's how I got started in the field. Was that all those old prophecies and descriptions of something in the sky? But I also, I have, I watched the Ancient Alien. I used to watch the Ancient Alien show with Giorgio and Van Daniken, and I think
Hmm.
It's very blasphemous. I see it as towards creation and that. So I came up with my own theory of, instead of ancient aliens, ancient deities. Everything they say that aliens did in the past, I say fallen angels did. And you know what I came across? I've got around to reading John Milton's Paradise Lost, right? And in it, he says the pyramids, Baalbek, all the old sites, the things we can't explain, were built by fallen angels because they had the ability, and like Egypt, the three, because three is of the devil. This always comes in threes.
Right.
Those three, it was built by fallen angels, and they're gods, human bodies, animal and bird heads, very occult, So everything that they say in that show, you could say it's interdimensional, malevolent entities, and which religious wise we call demons and fallen angels, whoever they are. But they built all of that stuff. They could lift. and levitate and do all of that stuff, And in his book, he says the King Solomon's temple, the pyramids, they were all built by fallen angels. Yeah. So it's interesting. I had that thought, and then years later read Milton and said, there you go. This is over 500 years ago, and he has the same thought.
No, I get it. I get it, and that's why I say it's such a fascinating topic. It's all over the place, but it's more used than just UFOs, and I do think there's a
Yeah.
connection between it all.
Yeah.
And I even think that there's the life source connection. Does it come from the fallen ones? I don't know. I mean, did it come from what was it, Inky and Ilnu or whatever their names were? They
Yeah.
came from what was the
Enki.
planet
Enki.
Nibiru or something like
Yeah.
that. The bronze star. Um, I'm not saying that this is all hypothetical. I think that there is a lot of truth to things when we look into it. What do you think of the Gregorian calendar? And the fact that we used to have 13 months and 28 days to a month that equaled the same time frame and all that. Do you think when I'm trying to reflect here to how you were analyzing the Mayan dates and whatnot, and the Mayan calendar. Do you think because we interfered and intercepted with new ways of doing things and going back to 12 when we had 13 months with less days and 12 months with more? Do
Yeah.
you think that has any connection or enlightenment to what the Mayans were trying to share?
Well, the Mayan calendar, I wrote this, it was a novel, sci-fi novel, where an asteroid hits Earth, but I was doing the research on the factual stuff. But what really got me was how the heck did the Mayans come up with this calendar that they did? It is based on the wobble of the earth and how over years, the earth kind of tilts the other way. There's a wobble to it, and you're constantly
Mm-hmm.
moving. And it takes, I think it was 2,600 years with 2472, whatever it was. How did they come up with that? And they're 1,000% accurate. The wobble, the spin of the earth, and how long. I don't care if you got a hole in a rock that every night you look and you notice it moves a hair. How could you mathematically figure this thing out that over that time period we do one complete rotation and then it all starts again, and it's all based on the earth's wobble, which is just a hair a day. And to me, I don't understand how they figured that out, but they were 1,000% accurate. And again, they started doing, this is a very primitive culture that all of a sudden they do the calendar, they start doing brain surgery, dentistry, high level mathematics. All of a sudden, overnight, they got all of this stuff,
Yeah.
and they attribute it to, I can't think of his name now, Coco Khan, who, a blonde hair, blue eyed guy with the elongated skull that walked out of the ocean onto the beach, white guy, and he gave them all this knowledge. Where is that our neighbor that Elizondo refers to that lives in the ocean? I don't know. But all of a sudden, the Mayans, they got it.
Well,
They knew what they were talking
there
about,
are.
and they shouldn't have.
Yeah, right. But there are theories of the aquatics that they actually help simulate and start life and seeded life
Yeah,
to Earth.
yeah,
How factual truth it is, I don't know, but I know that there are books on it. I know there's theories involving it. Only thing I know for sure is we are seeing activities in the water. People are
yeah,
reporting it. People are seeing it. And it's well supported and it's well documented. And that's why they came up with its own name, underwater submersibles and so forth like
yeah.
that. But
USO.
uh,
And,
so,
and
yeah,
that group,
USOs.
yeah, USOs. That group with Elizondo changed the name too from Ariel, ATIP or whatever they called it, Ariel. And now I don't remember the new name. It's almost like AARP, but it talks about it's similar to that. It talks about submersibles and air, different elements that it can move through. But to me, they're pointing to the ocean as where this
Yeah,
stuff is coming from. They're not saying it yet. So I'm really curious what the heck's down there.
it's
Atlantis,
all
is it the
blessing in
old
Earth.
Atlantis?
Yeah,
Atlantis
maybe.
sunk. And maybe they were amphibian, and it sunk and they're still there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we really don't know. That's the whole thing. We couldn't identify one in front of us. If an Atlantean walked past us, maybe they were amphibian, like you said. I don't
Yeah.
know, but it's possible, and that's the great part of these topics: the theory behind it all, and the knowledge. We got to
They
keep
got the
pushing
they got the
forward.
gills. They got the gills behind the ear like Kevin Costner in Waterworld.
Waterworld, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, they might. Maybe, and you know what?
Who
Maybe they're
knows?
actually conditioning us in more ways than one with some of these things. We're seeing
Yeah.
false narrative, but we're seeing realistic truth. You got to look at the whole picture here, because maybe we are being told some things, but not enough things. And
Yeah.
and then when you reflect the alien abduction, you have people who claim that they seen Bigfoot up and then in the craft with them. Um, there's so many of so much of indifferences, of shared information. It's mind-boggling how to get through it all. But yeah, I commend you on being able to stand strong enough to write 10 books,
Yeah.
and stay on a path of correctness to even complete them, because that's my work is sitting there for one reason, because I always bring something new to the table, and it changes this chapter, that
Yeah.
chapter, this chapter, the other book. And it's like, where do you go with it? You want to put all the information in you can, and don't release anything prematurely. But,
You almost have to write.
a lot of people wind up doing it.
You have to write a diary where your thought process changed. My books, if you look at my first, second, third, and then my ninth, 10th, I have a different thought process over the years. It really do. But when
Yeah.
you talk about Bigfoot and UFOs, two of the best cases are in Pennsylvania ever. You
Right.
got Prescott Island up in Erie, right, 1966. These 5 people in a car from New York are on the beach with their car. They get stuck in the sand. I think two of them go for help. 3 stay in the car, and there's UFO sightings over Lake Erie. They go for help, and then a Bigfoot comes out of like the shrubs, the brush there, and it shakes the car, scratches the car. The state trooper or the park police, whatever, come. I got photos of the fur from it got caught on a branch, and there's a park police pointing right at it, saying, right there's the branch, there's the fur. I got a photo from '66, and Blue Book shows up, and the footprints have this goo substance in the footprints, and the police state troopers up there are making casts. The Air Force collects all the casts. They kick dirt in all the footprints, and they take all the evidence away. So that was one in Prescott Island. The other one was 73. So that's 66, 73 in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. There's a big UFO wave in 73. Starts in Pascagoula, goes up the Mississippi River. Ton of cases across Pennsylvania. It ends up in New Hampshire, and I think it lasted 6 weeks, is what it was. But one case in Uniontown, PA, they see these people. I don't know if they come out their door. I think they get home. It's almost a lot like Skinwalker, the opening of the book. They get home and they see a UFO in the field, and there's a Bigfoot by their wooden fence posts, right? He takes his rifle, he shoots, and he says, I can see the tracer, and I hit him. I hit him twice. He disappears. Then the UFO leaves. They call Stan Gordon locally here in Greensburg, and his investigators show up. The state police show up. There's a circular area that's glowing at night. The cop says, I don't need my flashlight because this is glowing enough that I can see in the area. One of Stan's investigators walks into the circular area, maybe it was 30 feet, He collapses. He starts howling like a dog or a wolf. They had to run in and drag him out of the circle. And of course they say years later that nothing grew in that area. So two of the best cases were here in Pennsylvania of Bigfoot and UFOs. But I like to go with Bigfoot. I don't think he's a mammal, like us that's in the woods. I like to go back to Skinwalker and the Native Americans who claim that these are shapeshifters. They're they're interdimensional spirit entity things, and they can shapeshift into Wendigo, Bigfoot, aliens, all of that type of stuff. And again, you fall back into that interdimensional thing. But I think the Native Americans had it right on a lot of those creatures being shapeshifters.
Yeah, I believe you're right. I really do. And again, it's good theories on stuff. I think that place up in Uniontown now they call it. They gave it a name. Not that it matters, but I thought they called it Tom's Mountain Retreat. The place of 73. Yeah, the place of 73 or something like that. Wow, we've been on for 2 hours, bud.
Oh, yeah, bud, we got to cut it off. I got to eat dinner.
No, I'm not going to cut it off. We can go further, but you're going to give me a minute, and I'll be right back.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Think of something good. I'm sorry. I wanted to let the dog out. I didn't want no accidents.
Yeah.
I didn't want no accidents. So, all right, where do you want to go from here? I think we picked up a lot. All right, let's go back to Phil Schneider. What do you think of that story? I mean, just for a minute, I wanted to clarify with you.
Yeah, let me tell you this first. When we were talking about the interdimensional, when this stuff was happening in my house, 2014, 15, 16, I go to the MUFON Symposium 2017, and I'm sitting with Jan Harzan and his wife at the dinner table, and I'm telling them that there's something in my house, something's going on. The wife, who's a devout Christian, says to me, John, I have been at these symposiums. I have seen shadow people moving among the people as they're at the symposium. So now in 2018 or 19, no, I think it was 19, there's a big brouhaha at the MUFON Symposium. State directors are sitting there watching the lectures, and there was like 6 of them who saw shadow people walking among the tables, walking across the whole thing. And they demanded answers. What's going on? This is all part of why I think that interdimensional thing, and it's drawn. There's a connection to this UFO field and it. And I'll tell you this too. So I told you that I was filming Hangar 1 and something showed up in my house, right? So now go back. I joined MUFON in 98, right? So 99, I go to my first UFO conference in Northern Virginia. It's a 2-hour drive or 200 miles, 3-hour drive away. I go to my first MUFON Symposium, right? And I meet a woman there at lunchtime. She shows up at 11. And I'm looking at her, and I'm saying, there's something strange about this woman. Maybe she was albino. She's very attractive, blonde, but very pale, gray, bloodshot eyes. She gets there at 11. I see her sit down. I go at lunchtime. I make sure I get behind her. I sit with her. We're talking. She never comes back to the symposium. She's there for 1 hour, the 12 o'clock break. And this is Saturday, I think it was, and she's gone. She doesn't come back, right? So I go to the symposium, everything's good. I come home. The next 4 nights, I have all kinds of paranormal activity. I have an out of body experience. I'm having lucid dreams. There's these two hybrid kids in my dream. My dog, my Doberman, is floating, legs out, floating, and you got this kid. He's got no shirt on. He's got gigantic forearms, twice the size of mine, the bone sticking out of the end, and big bug eyes and hair plugs. And the dog's floating and he's poking him. And I'm yelling at him, stop poking my dog, right? And I can only see a beige background. I couldn't see furniture. I couldn't see anything. I look to the right. There's another hybrid kid standing there, black slick back hair. It kind of it looked like Nosferatu, black slick back hair. It had like a rat face, a rat teeth, buck teeth type thing, and he's standing there, and I'm waking up about every hour, hour and a half. There's something in my dream that there's this hairy creature standing next to the bed over me. I'm waking up swinging my fist because I feel it there. I feel something in my room. I notice something in the corner of my room. There's something else in that room with me. So why does that happen after the first UFO conference that I attend? What's the connection with UFOs and these interdimensional entities? My girlfriend at the time looks up, even though I joined MUFON, I'm an investigator. She goes to the site and says, John, when you're telling me about this, that first night that you got home, there was a UFO sighting at Penn State and another one in Morgantown, West Virginia. If you draw a straight line, it goes right over your house. So I don't know, but it's very strange. I do the UFO TV show. I got all kinds of activity. And my first conference I go to, I got all kinds of lucid dreams for 4 nights and activity, out of body experience. And you get these shadow people showing up to conferences. And, there was a guy, he was the second in charge of the abduction team. He dies in his room at the conference. He's like 45 years old. He goes up to his room, he passes away. He's second in charge. So again, the ufologists die early. And I there's a connection here between this field and a lot of strange stuff.
Yeah, I agree on on all the ones that we've lost, that were involved with ufology and more. I do really think about this interdimensional and more or less of what it all means, what it could mean. Even like when we watch like Expedition Bigfoot, with clarity. I don't know if you watched any of that show at all.
No.
But Mariah was with, I think, Scott, if that's his name, on a bank. And they got a very good shadow figure going by, just as they were getting hotspots related to thermal imaging cameras and stuff, showing the possibility that was some type of creature like Bigfoot. So we're seeing things like this come out more. It's like the cameras are new third eye, and it is it is allowing us to see more. And some pictures that I have been shared, I gotta tell you, I don't see a lot of the things that some people sometimes see. But I think we all have a different perception of what we're looking at, and it works that way. But I do believe, because of things in my life, I mean, I've had some mysterious things happen. We all dream. I've dreamt as a kid. I used to go places and tell my father, I was here before. I know who that guy is, but I don't know his name. And he's like, you don't know him. And I was probably 5 years old. I remember hanging over the back seat, from the back seat to the front seat of the car, talking to my dad saying, I know him. I just don't know why I know my dad. No, you never saw him before. Why did these things happen? And then, you're mentioning different weirdness. Like there's another one for you, I guess I'll throw out there. Black-eyed children.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to deal with black-eyed children in any of your years with MUFON?
No, I can't say with MUFON that's come up. That's a phenomenon that all of a sudden popped up in, like, I don't, let's say the 90s. I'm not certain. Where you get these kids with these black eyes, right? And
Hmm.
you'll be in your car and they'll walk up and knock on your window and say, "Can you let us in? We need a ride." Or they come to the front door of a house. There's two of them, and we have to use the bathroom. Can you invite us in? Like, it's like one of these, entities that has to be invited in, and that's their
Permission.
MO, permission. And once they're in, and it's just, it's the same thing with these demonic entities. Uh, Once you drive it out, it's a long story, but there were women I dated that I hadn't spoken to in 10, 15 years. When I drove it out, they show up, one shows up at my door. A couple others call me, "Well, you want to invite me over?" And I'm saying to myself, it's trying to get back in through the woman. It's trying to get invited in. The one woman, I opened the door, she walked right in, but I never invited her in. She comes back like 2 days later to the front door. "Oh, John, can you invite me in?" And I said, "No, I'm working on my book right now, and I'm busy." And I never opened the door because I was very suspicious. Why would she all of a sudden show up? And I'm on a dating site, and I meet this woman in Pittsburgh, very attractive. And we go meet at a Mexican restaurant, and we're talking. And, she's saying, "Well, I like you, and I'm all into this stuff." She goes, I've seen you on TV, and you'll like me." And she goes, "But, I was just in South Africa for a month." I said, "What are you doing there?" She goes, "Exorcisms." I said, "Exorcisms?" I said, "Are you doing it with a priest or somebody?" "No, I'm doing with Olga, the South African voodoo priestess." I said, "Really?" And again, my mind's going, what they're trying to attach to me, right? So she goes, "I'll come over your house," wink, wink. "I'll sleep over your house," wink, wink. But she goes, "First, you have to invite Olga, the South African voodoo priestess, over. I want her to cleanse your house and whatever she." And I said to her, "Look, you're attractive. I would have dated you. There is no way in hell I'm inviting Olga, the South African voodoo priestess, over my house when I just had a demonic entity in that I drove out." And I read that voodoo and Brazilian macumbe, when you get involved in that, these are the most heinous creatures that get into your house, and the hardest exorcisms are those two types of things. So it's so many strange things happened over those couple of year periods, that I just felt that there was a real malevolent interdimensional presence going on at that time.
Well, maybe we're just unaware that these are like watchers, that
Yeah,
they
I
know
think they
about
are
us. They know
watching.
it.
Yeah,
So think about it. We don't have a moment of privacy in life. They know everything we're doing. And it's really funny. On a couple paranormal things where people go out there, and from the other side, you get this voice through the EVP that says your name, and it's
right.
like nobody said anybody's name. How
Yeah,
did the hell did they know it was Michael? You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
I've been on a couple of these things where mysterious stuff like that's happened, as well as I was able to actually communicate with orbs, and they weren't bugs, they were orbs, and I got them to land in my hand. I got it in video, and when I told
hmm,
them, "Okay, thank you, you can leave," they scattered. The funny part about the orbs, they can collect and take up no space, meaning like to the size of a pin, and
yeah,
you can be filtrated with them. I witnessed in front of my own hands doing these things, and I have done them. This is why I do what I do.
yeah,
And I want to be the show that talks about everything. I just want to be the show that talks about everything because everything is just all connected.
yeah,
Um, when I told them to land in my hand, you could see right on the camera multiple little white silhouettes of light come and all collect to one spot. The energy all went to one spot. Now I didn't feel anything. I didn't get any like energies, or
Yeah.
at least not that I was aware of. And when I said thank you, that one spot turned into a cluster and just left my hand.
Wow.
So they're intelligent,
Yeah.
but what are they? And who are they? And then I've gotten pictures of me where I've gotten pictures of orbs where I got identifiable faces of some sort, of something, an entity of something, the eyes, the mouth, the nose with clarity in it coming right at me. What are they? I have no clue, but I want to keep researching to find out, at least, while I'm on this earth. It's what I like. But how does it all connect is the big question, I guess. Really, how does it all connect? If Lou says that they're next door, that they're like there are neighbors using verbiage like that, that tells me that scientifically maybe he has now been given some information that they want him to focus a different way, allowing him to know just a little bit more due to all the governmental programs and projects that go on through the deep state military industrial complex, or who, whether it's the Rockefellers or the Soros of the world. I don't know, but it's like we're living in a dark age of something, especially the last 20 months, without a doubt. And it seems that there are so many connections biblically, the light, the dark, this, that. And it seems we're at a heightened time as well, because I get a lot of mail from people, and I'm not nobody. I'm really not. I'm just a regular guy having a good time. I do my research. I know about things when I talk with people. I can hold a conversation. I don't know everything, but I do want to know everything. The problem is, how do we get to understand it more? We know that these things can manipulate matter in our reality. They don't need any, they can walk through a wall. I mean, there's so many things that I've seen, but yet the same goes for these crafts. They disappear into the side of a mountain. Look at Mount Shasta, where people talk about like they think that there's some type of entrance there, or they go down into a volcano. So they can protect themselves from heat, from cold, from solid matters, from atmospheric pressures, and water. They can go as fast underwater as they can in the sky, basically.
Right.
We have no way of tracking these things when they hit the water. We can't even keep up with them. And when we talk about, like you were saying, water, is the possibility of water, is it connected to the people of Atlantis? Were they aquatic? I guess all that is a very high possibility. But how do we get conclusive evidence to this? I guess we have to, like for me, I have to stay keeping myself conditioned to one element to try to figure out what the next one is. And I don't think me personally, I'm just saying, I don't think I've come to the conclusion where I can move off one yet. I experiment in them all. I love getting out into the fields and trying to realistically find out as much as I can or experience it. I don't fear dark. I walk in the dark. I walk through the woods in the dark. I'm actually hoping that I encounter something at some point, that doesn't, tear me to shreds. But I'm more afraid of any living animal than I am from the things from the other side, because I've dealt with it. I've dealt with them in front of me. I've dealt with them on camera. I've experienced it. I experienced things that have happened in my home that were unexplainable and unimaginable to some people. And not just hearing footsteps, but watching things move right in front of me, like a fan getting rocked. And there was no reason. Like I had this oscillating fan going. And I'm telling my wife, I says, the last couple of nights, the activity on the steps have been very weird. Yeah. And as soon as I said that, I had a hassock there, one of them footstools you put your feet up on, the old school thing. And the fan was right next to it, 4-pedestal fan, with going back and forth, perfectly running, does it 365 days a year, well, in the summer months. So whatever the summer way, it just sits there, does its thing. I heard a thunk, And I looked down at the hassock because that's what was in front of me. And then I heard like a clatter of some type of noise. And I look up and the fan's rocking back and forth, teeter totting like it's going to fall. And it's designed to sit and operate,
Mm.
whether it's on flat flooring or carpet. And that's what it was doing. But something that I did not see, or did she see at that time in front of our eyes, but yet this, I want to say this anomaly happened, it truly happened. So it was like something, and I even said, I yelled out to her, I says, hey, something, did you see that? Because something just tripped over the hassock and tried knocking the fan over and it caught it. And I watched it catch it, but I didn't see it catch it.
Yeah.
But I watched it. And I said to myself, I have to keep doing what I'm doing. There's something so much more to this. Then I had books falling in the hall, or like it was like somebody took a big giant book and took it up to the 12-foot ceiling, because we had this entrance that came up to this sunroom. And it sounded like somebody just took it and dropped it to the floor. I mean, it made me jump out of my seat and go from the couch, go for a gun, because I thought somebody was in my home.
Those are the
It was
noises
nuts.
that I had. Yeah, those are the noises I had. Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know the mystery behind them. I seen things happen with my eyes, but I never had a visual contact to any of it like that. But it's shadow figures. Yeah.
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 Let
I've
me tell
seen
you
shadow
something.
figures.
When I had those noises and I brought the priests in and I put the blessed coins, we did the blessed coins the first time the priest came. He blessed everything. I put blessed coins the four corners of my house, four corners of my property. I'm going to
Right.
bed. I'm going to bed. My dog, my 108-pound Doberman, runs down the stairs to the front door like he sensed something was there, heard something, and
Mm-hmm.
there is the loudest bang outside you ever. Boom! And my dog starts barking. I run downstairs to see, the spotlights don't come on from movement. So I'm looking. I go to bed. In the morning, I wake up. There's a text from my neighbor at 10:23 p.m. John, did you hear that bang? So they heard it too, right? He said, she said, we thought a deer ran into our garage door or a transformer exploded. We don't have any of those in my neighborhood. Everything's underground. But she heard it, right? So now, a couple of weeks later, I'm talking to my neighbor three doors over. He comes to the UFO conferences, right? And I'm telling him about this activity and the banging. He turns all white. He goes, John, we've been having this banging sounds in our house because it can't get back into my house and it's pissed off. It can't get back in. And he says, it sounds like somebody dropped a car on our ceiling. Boom! I said, that is the exact same stuff I'm having in my house. It can't get back in. So there's a religious connection to this. I'll tell you something else that happened that's really confirmed all of this stuff. I go visit my daughter and I come back in April and I said, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a book about this, the string theory of the unexplained. I sit down at
Mm-hmm.
my laptop, I start typing, and I look up, my backyard burst into flames. The whole freaking thing is on fire, moving west to east, but it's outside of my fence line. It never entered my fence line, and I'm looking because I put those blessed coins out there, right? It can't get back in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I call the police and I say, there's three. I live next to a cemetery. My property, I got a stockade fence, a lot of trees. I said, I see three guys in the cemetery. He goes, nah, they called it in right before you. So they were right there. They're like 20 feet from where the fire started, right? Because I called 911 and I said, I think some kids put lighter fluid. This thing is on fire in a straight line on the other side of my fence. It won't enter my yard, right? So I mean, it's a big fire. They had fire engines from all different directions to get to it because there really isn't a fire hydrant close to it, right? So it's all said and done. It's a couple hours later. I get a phone call. I had ordered my headstone. It's the Holy Bible, says Holy Bible, a lot of religious stuff on it, right? The guy says, "How do you like your headstone?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said they installed it this afternoon. And I said, "Were those the guys in the cemetery that called in the fire?" He said, "Yeah, they were there when the thing burst into flames. As soon as they installed my religious Holy Bible headstone, it burst into flames out of anger. Because if you read anything, and I read all the books on exorcism, the priest will remove curtains, rugs, he just keeps the bed and an end table and a chair, and that's it. Because these demons, these entities can burst it into flames. So there's another example of something that's interdimensional, and it connects to religion because I've read a number of times that this UFO question will be the most important question in humanity because if you remember the movie Contact, remember they wouldn't let Jodie Foster go up because she didn't believe in God. They wouldn't put her through the machine or whatever it was because if the encounter is made, they didn't want an atheist, right? Did you ever see Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End? That story. They made a movie out of it on a 3-part on Sci-Fi Channel, where the UFO shows up, gives us all of these cures. It gives us a different religion. Everybody follows it and drops Christianity, Islam, all of that. And it turns out
the same way they're heading with us now. Yeah, the same
right,
way they're
yeah,
heading. Yeah,
exactly.
I have a vague memory of it, but they're talking about doing all these same things again, just as that was represented.
But I'm going back years, but the UFO
right.
was piloted by demons. I mean, big wings, they were devils, right? So I have read from other people that the question that's going to come up, the first question when the encounter is made, probably where are you from, right? How'd you get here? One of the first 3 or 4 questions is going to be, do you believe in God? Were you created? Did you evolve? Do you believe in God? That is one of the questions that's going to come up. And I have read from a number of sources that it's going to be a trick, it's going to be a trick, a deception. They're going to tell us something, and because they're superior with all this technology and they can give us cures and clean up the environment like they've always said with the abductions, we're going to give you a cure, we're going to clean the environment, right? That we're going to follow them, and it's going to be the greatest deception. And it's in the Bible that others will show up and deceive you, but because something, it's called the great apostasy. Something is going to happen in the future that pulls about 80% of the people away from a belief in God and religion to follow something else. And I think the only thing that could do that is the UFO question, the alien question. If it's publicized on TV, here they are, we meet them, and they say, we created you, there is no God, or they got a totally different story, 80% of the people are going to follow this false religion, and it's going to be a trick. And that's why I think there's a connection here to the Bible and to religion and to things that are written in the Bible that are pretty clear about what's coming.
Right. Well, you might not know this, okay? But I really have studied ancient bibliology. I'm a pastor.
Okay.
Retired. So I've always liked, this is who I am, this is my makeup. Subjects of interest, books that don't make it, books that didn't make it into the Bible, and the fact that everything's always rewritten or reintroduced or reworded and so forth. And I find it fascinating. I think what you're saying is fruitful, and it's a good objective of theory. But me personally, when you look at like devil-like creatures, we didn't have any of that. There was like us as human, and then you look at like what we reflect to saying like Lucifer is demonic, and everybody in their minds and automatically figures here's this red-faced devil with wings and
Horns.
Mothman look like,
Yeah,
but they
horns.
never existed like that.
No, that's a
The real
theatrical version.
depiction,
Yeah.
yes, it's all the theatrical end. It's the paganism of it all.
Yeah.
And, people need to think that when we look into the source of one, David Wilcox used to talk about this, but I never really accepted his complete theory on it. But when we look into the one of creation, it's of nothing, but yet it's of intelligence, and it is of creation, and it's what makes us all.
Yeah.
That's my theory of how you have the light to the dark and to the depths of the dark, which is what everybody looks as Lucifer or Luciferian. They were all placed in the bottom of a pit for a purpose. But what is that pit? Is that pit really of the inner earth? No, it's doubtful. But I do think, as you're saying, it's dimensional.
Yeah,
I really believe it's dimensional. And I think we have more than one source of watchers. I don't think angels look like cherubs. I don't think that they have wings and long flowing hair. I don't. I believe it's like a subject of angelic. Now, that's only my theory of how I see it, but it doesn't mean that you're wrong or that I am. It just says to me that we have a more of an open platform of what is this dimension all about? And then we have some scientific evidence saying that we know that there are different, up to 12 different levels of dimension, but they don't explain any of it. They call it consciousness levels.
Right.
I call it the battle of dimensions, that parallel universe. But I think that the universe, there's something right next door to us. There's not a joke about it. There's something right next door to us, because what we're experiencing and what and more so even funny, why are we seeing so much? Why is the abundance so much greater now? Is it because we have internet service and we're just sharing it more? And they know that we are, and they energize from it, because people say when they see a ghost, sometimes they get weak-kneed, they lose their energy, they get sick, they vomit, they like their sugar drops. There's all these adverse effects that happen when they really make contact with something that's unexplainable. And you do see the ailments happen to some people.
There are a lot of people believe that if you think about it, they call it a tulpa, Tulpa. Your mind can manifest that creature, that the source of all of this is in your mind, that your mind is that powerful. If you're into the paranormal and you're thinking about these things, but then with a lot of people, they're not into it, and they weren't thinking about it, and they have an encounter that you can actually create the energy that manifests this stuff. But I'll tell you something else. With Tom DeLonge, when he first got involved in 2017, he made an interesting quote where he said, "These people are heroes fighting against demons." That's what he said. And then Lou Elizondo last month, when he was talking about this whole thing, he mentioned that he discussed this with people in the military, and a couple of generals said, "Don't you read your Bible? This whole UFO thing is not true. It's demonic, and these things are demons." There's one other thing that Lou said, and I kind of just lost it in my head. But he was going along those same lines of about it being demonic, same as Tom DeLonge. So I don't know.
When a president becomes a president, they have their briefings.
Yeah,
and they're entitled to certain. Yeah. But they do get it to some degree. Now, how much information, I don't know. One of the things that I have a lot of information on was the conversation where they were briefing and giving explanation to Ronald Reagan. And at the end of it, because he was very religious, he cried. And he was very disappointed because he had a belief system of what he grew up with. And what they expressed.
Reagan, or is that Carter? Because I remember Richard Dolan saying Carter was given a report on UFOs because he's always asked for it. He wanted to know. And when he read the report, he was sitting at his desk and he covered his eyes and he just started to weep as to whatever the report said.
I may not have ever gotten a hold of that information. Dolan may have talked about it, and
Yeah.
he's a rock star. He's a pretty straight up guy, forward guy. Everything that I know reflects back to the
Reagan.
experience with Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know for a fact, I think a couple of the people in the community, some of the old schoolers that are out there, journalists, actually spoke about that encounter. And I think even Nick Pope brought it up once.
Yeah.
Because in one of his lectures that he was doing, or in a discussion podcast that he was on, they were talking about the alien UFO over Washington, the White House, Washington. And also one occurred the same week in China over what they called the Pink House, which was a representation of China, the same as our White House, but that was their Pink House.
Yes.
And it went further into details about scenarios as we're discussing here, and I'm sure like being with MUFON too. What are your theories on, or just your thoughts on what was written in the newspapers and so forth when we had those 6 crafts over the White House in 1952, I think it was?
Oh yeah. They were the UFOs over DC. I think there were 9 of them. It was 2 weekends in July. It was like the 23rd and the 30th, I think, were the 2 weekends. But it's interesting. They flew over. When we launched our fighter jets from Delaware, they turned around and left. Our jets land. They come back again. We send them up again. They leave. And Truman gives a standing order that's still there today that says if you can't talk them down, shoot them down. Shoot them down. That was the name of a book by Frank Frascino. Talking about the famous UFO case in Flatwoods, West Virginia. He named the book "Shoot 'Em Down" because he actually did a lot of research. In Korea, we lost 82 planes in Korea in the war. We lost 66 planes over the Atlantic on the east coast of the U.S. in training missions. And in most of those instances, neither the pilot or co-pilot parachuted out. So his belief was we got into an air battle with UFOs off of the coast of the United States, and we lost 66 planes and the pilot and co-pilot. And he believes that we hit one of the UFOs and it came down and crash landed in Flatwoods, West Virginia. And that's that whole Flatwoods case where all those teenagers went down there and there was the big creature in some sort of pod levitating, and it had like a green face and red skin and wore a cloak, like a hoodie. And it had like red eyes and green skin and claws. But he was in something that was levitating like a pod, and it smelled of sulfur again. Sulfur is a marker of the demonic or the interdimensional. Sulfur, when that comes up to me, it's malevolent. But but that's the whole connection to that. That was July was the UFOs over DC. September was the crash in Flatwoods. But we had been doing training pilots the whole time, and yet we lost almost as many planes as we did in the war. How's that possible? How do you lose 66 planes training and you lose 82 in the actual Korean War? Doesn't make any sense. But he did a lot of research, and that was the first UFO conference I ever spoke at, St. Albans. I got it right up on the wall over there with my plaques. St. Albans, West Virginia. Stanton Friedman, Bill Burns, Frank Frascino, and we did the conference down there on the Flatwoods case. So I think that was September.
I love Stanton. I love Stanton. He was a hard ass, and he didn't believe Bob Lazar at all. He didn't. We had many talks. I mean, fascinating story. I worked in the filling station. Of course, Pittsburgh was his. He had job here and things like that, and he used to do radio shows. He didn't get. Yeah, exactly. Well, he would get gas at my father's gas station. I didn't even know who he was. He just started talking to me one night, and I worked nighttime. My dad be in the garage sleeping because he would come from working at the city.
Yeah.
And I would only see him like, a couple times a month maybe. And sometimes it would go in periodically be closer together and then sometimes farther apart. But he opened me up. This was another doorway that opened me up. And I was fascinated by his stories and the conversations and whatnot. Just a rock star of a person. He really was. All right, here's one for you. We never get enough information on this, and it's always thrown out the door that we do. But what about the Baltic Sea anomaly, where the ship was looking for wrecks and it come across something to me, and I've watched video. I don't want to say videos, but I've watched TV programs where they had a lot of really definitive information from sending down cameras and stuff. Does it look UFO to you? It does to me. It looks like something that we would understand as a UFO.
Yeah, it did look like something was under the ocean on the floor there. And I can't. I do that kind of disappeared, and nobody talks about it anymore. And I don't remember if they picked it up on like with sonar or something. You know that they whatever they use, Lowrance, and they picked it up on. But there was something to it that it was giving off something that they were able to locate it. I don't know if it was a sound or I don't know, but it kind of disappeared. I mean, you brought it up. I haven't heard anything about that in 10 years.
Yeah, I haven't either, but we know it's laying down there. Well, supposedly it's down there, unless there was some type of undercover, military recovery system thing or whatever. If they would be able to get something like that out, I would have to say between how we seem to work with other countries when it comes to certain issues, there would have been more hands into the barrel on that hot topic for sure. I didn't hear anything more about it either, but I thought it was a fascinating story, how it was found. Independent guys looking for shipwrecks, sending down signals, and they were able to create this anomaly. And they were like, something's there. We got to check it out. I thought it was really cool, and there's other stories out there like that exist too. There truly are.
Well, we get a guy, we got a guy coming to the Philly conference. He's from, I don't know, it's Croatia, one of those areas that he talks about those pyramids. Familiar with those pyramids that are out there? Huge pyramids, and he gives a pretty good presentation on that. I had him here in Pittsburgh, and he's flying himself in because he tours. I can't think of his name. Starts with a B, like Blavanovich or something. And he gives a presentation on those pyramids. I don't know if they're in Romania or wherever they're located in the Baltic area. There's huge pyramids there that they have trees and shrubbery on them now, but you could see they look exactly like the pyramids.
Yeah, well, the technology that we have now, I can't think it off the top of my head, that they use, it removes all that and it shows it. And then in Alaska, you have, I think, what they call the Black Pyramid. It's actually something that was built and constructed underground, and it has an energy resource to it, some type of energy source to it. And we know that it's there. You're not allowed to go anywhere near this area. It's all fenced off. It's government controlled. But I think they call that the Black Sapphire Pyramid, or at least I think that's what the indigenous call it up there. But I think it's known as the Black Pyramid. And there's more than one style of pyramid too. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 of them, but they're worldwide. They're everywhere. And then when we take the telescope and look on Mars and whatnot, you see things that resemble them up there.
Do you know where the most?
Do you don't think that life is capable in space? What's your theory on the bird found on Mars or the half face? Do you really believe it's a shadow of light or anomaly or do you think it's something more? Because we got Webb up here now. It can look 65 light years away, but they won't point it at any of this stuff on Mars.
Yeah, they
it's there.
At one point when we went back up there after we got the good picture of it, the camera mysteriously shut off before it could film that area. I think the second and the third time that we sent, which is odd. No, I think it was a face, but who put it there? But I want to go back to Antarctica. There's Lake Vostok. Well, all of that too. Lake Vostok. I read years ago. There's some energy source under there, like nuclear or whatever, under there. But if you remember the night that Trump beat Hillary Clinton, there was a team that went to Antarctica, to that Lake Vostok area. It was John Kerry, the Black
Yeah.
Pope of Russia. Uh,
Right.
uh, I don't know if it was Neil Armstrong, one of those astronauts, and a team that went there. What would John Kerry be doing there, and the Pope, the Russian Pope, uh, on election night? I think that
The
they thought Hillary
Archangel.
they thought Hillary was going to win, and there was going to be an announcement of what was under the ice, maybe at Lake Vostok, what's under there, because you brought up the Germans. That was their fallback plan, was Argentina and Antarctica. The new the Schwaben was what, New Germany, I think that means. And
Yeah.
they
Well,
found
the blonde hair, blue eyes.
the subs had cave tunnels they could go through. There was something under there that they discovered, and those U-boats, when the war was ending, and we captured two or three of the U-boats, they're trying to get away carrying red mercury. What do you carry red mercury? You would have gold, silver, all the teeth of the Jewish people you killed that were gold. You'd have stuff you can barter and make a life with. They're carrying barrels of red mercury trying to get to Antarctica. So there's something under there, and it's an interesting story. And what were those people doing there the night of the election? And Trump beats Hillary and stunned everyone, and then there's no announcement. And then the cover story comes out. They were there to take a look at global warming, to the effects of it on election night with the Pope and John Kerry. Really? They wanted to look at global warming. I don't buy that.
No, that's not. Well, I heard that story, but I have a different part of the story. I thought I mentioned it actually at the earlier part of us talking tonight, but maybe this evening here, maybe I didn't. But it had to do with something called the Ark of Gabriel that was discovered and needed to be taken there to be put back into a certain place. Now,
Okay, I'd
I'm
never
only
heard
saying,
that.
yeah, and the paperwork came to the Russian Pope, who was there from the Vatican, on how to handle it and to put it into this place. And John Podesta was the one that was pushing for Hillary, and she did on TV. She was getting ready to tell everybody something because they created the new aerial phenomena words of what the UFOs are. We don't look at UFOs no more that way. We call them this. They
UAP.
were getting ready for some type of they were getting ready for some type of announcement, without a doubt, that never took place. But the evidence that has been talked about, even in Russia, was when the Pope was there, Kerry came, even Obama went to visit, and then you had you had I can't think of his name. You're right. The astronaut went there. He became deathly ill.
Yeah.
And he said he actually shared the fact that he was now on some type of craft that made it to the moon in under 40 seconds. I'm sorry, 40 minutes. And he says, but one of the things that he shared was they're terrifying. Whatever these are, whatever is there, whatever he got introduced to, he suffered almost nearly a fatal heart attack over it because they had to rush him out.
Yeah, they did.
So,
they did.
And now he admits to a young girl where there's videos saying, when she asked him, what would it be like what's it like to go to the moon? He says, well, I've never been there, so I can't really answer. The answer was like he was never there. I don't know if you caught that. A little girl put him on the spot, and he didn't know what to say.
Yeah. I know he tried to avoid interviews because he didn't want to lie about it, as to whether we actually had been to the moon or we never were, or he did see a craft, hovering in the distance when we were on the moon. But he did very, very few interviews because he didn't want to lie, and so he didn't want to do any interviews. But that term UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, that they claim that they created recently. I'm reading something, and there it is. The first time they used that terminology was Project Sign, which was the first look at UFOs in the late 40s, maybe 48 or so, before they went to Project Grudge. And right there, they called them
Right.
UAPs. They didn't call them flying saucers or UFOs, they were UAPs. So, you know,
Yeah, it's just bring back the old to the new, bring it,
yeah, yeah,
remodernize it, give it a purpose,
yeah. I mean,
repurpose it.
it's not
Yeah,
a new
it's pretty
term.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
right. So, what do you think about what was it, Admiral Brigg? Um,
bird, bird.
his bird, yeah, his expedition to the Antarctic, and that whole. I know it's a different type of matter, but he explains that he witnessed certain things, and it's mysterious because even his son, again, when you get into somebody else, Berg leaves. The son has material. The son's supposed to show up somewhere, mysteriously dies.
Yeah. Well, it's funny.
So,
I did some research on Ray Palmer of Amazing Stories and Fate magazine, and in the research,
mhm.
they talked about Admiral Byrd and that whole thing because it was a big story in Amazing Stories back in the 40s. It was a big deal, like the Shaver mysteries. It was one of the things that they talked about a lot. But the author of the book said that Admiral Byrd, the story was based on a book that was written by some European guy, and it was totally wrong, fabricated. He made up stuff about seeing dinosaurs and seeing large green pastures and all of that. So, I don't know. When I read this guy's story, because Amazing Stories took it and ran with it for years,
Mhm.
but he says that that was not what Admiral Byrd originally said. And then the guy who actually wrote the book and Amazing Stories got it wrong. They said they were in the North Pole and not the South Pole, where he flew over Antarctica, and they're saying he flew over the Arctic Circle, which anybody can do. So he screwed up even the story in the magazine. So I don't know. I've read that there's, I read this book because I was doing something on Ray Palmer and the founding of Fate magazine and Amazing Stories and his life, and that came up. I tell you what came up too was the Murray Island story, which was a week before Kenneth Arnold. That was the first issue of Fate magazine. Was the Kenneth Arnold sighting? They got the craft on the cover. That's the first issue of Fate magazine. But in in all the research that was done on that, Lee Chrisman is involved with Kenneth Dahl. Chrisman shows up in the JFK storyline years later, 15 years later. So he's an operative for the government, Lee Chrisman. And it absolutely appeared that they were trying to discredit Kenneth Arnold because he was sent to investigate it after his sighting. So now it's a month old, let's say. Murray Island happened first, Kenneth Arnold happened, and then Amazing Stories paid Arnold $200 to go investigate Murray Island. And the whole thing to him, he felt like he was being set up. This was a slag from a steel plant that was local, nearby, and but it made me again say that the disinformation in the field, the cover up, goes right back to that beginning, to the Battle of LA in 42, to cover, Kenneth Arnold, Murray Island in 47, Roswell. That group in the government has been there since the start and have made up stories, discredited people, thrown false cases at them to make them look bad. But, in researching that, it doesn't appear to me that Murray Island or the bird story is true. The Kecksburg story to me was the spy satellite.
Right.
Roswell to me was our testing of technology we got from the Nazis. So, but all these storylines develop from it, and the government, there's some group there that's in the middle of all of this, just twisting it, and I mean, you got to read the story of Ray Palmer. It's very detailed as to how they were trying to trick, and government agents were involved, and they were trying to trick Kenneth Arnold. So I don't
Yeah.
know. That's this field. You can't figure one thing out. You don't know what's the truth in this field. It happens. People see it. They report it, and a week later, it's totally something else. All these new details, embellished, government people involved, but something is happening. But you can never, ever get to the truth. And I'm going to end this. I'm going to finish this up on this note. There was a guy, Phil Klass, Klass. He was a big debunker. He fought with Stanton Friedman and those guys for years. But I tell you what, on his deathbed, he put the Phil Klass curse out there on the UFO field. He said, as I lay here on my deathbed and you are on yours at some point, you will not know any more about UFOs later as I know today. You will never know the truth about UFOs. And it's called the Phil Klass curse. And there's a few more lines to it, but he basically says, as long as you live, no matter what year it is, you won't know any more about the truth about UFOs than I know right now in 1960 or whatever it was that he was on his deathbed. And again, I say to myself, that's because it has to be interdimensional. Maybe you can't really get your hands on it, although there have been crashes like the Black Forest and others. But if it's interdimensional, maybe you can never get your hands on it because it's interdimensional. It has to go back. The creatures have to go back. I don't know. But with that, I'm going to go eat dinner, and it was a good interview.
It's been fun, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank
you so much for doing this. And so anybody, if you guys are out there still on paying attention, listen, there's a few hours here of some fun conversation. Maybe we can do this again.
Go to my website. Well, you can look me up on Amazon or Kindle. I have Amazon or Barnes and Noble, but all of my books are on Amazon and Kindle, and printed copies on Amazon. Some of them are on Barnes and Noble, or my website, johnventry.com. I have 104 lectures like this on there, and they're all free. I don't make any money on it, but I got a ton of lectures and stuff that I've done.
All right, so you're going to remember to send me an invite too when you have the Nick Pope and everybody hanging out, right?
April 29th, Nick Pope.
April 29th. I'm going to mark it down now, so I do put that in my forward calendar.
Yeah, April 29th.
I like Nick Pope a lot.
Yeah. Westmoreland Community College.
He's been a rock star, and he come. Pardon me.
Westmoreland Community College is where it is. Exit 75 on the Turnpike, Westmoreland Community College.
So you're not going to pick me up, right? Okay.
I ain't driving to Pittsburgh and coming back. No.
No, I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate
you. All right,
you.
sounds good. All right.
Have a great night.
All right,
take
too.
care. And thanks everybody for hanging out and listening through the whole thing with John Ventry and me. It was a lot of fun. We appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed the segment, and we'll try to definitely get him back because it's a very rewarding couple hours to kill with a guy that has so much knowledge. So you guys all have a great evening and take care. Appreciate you.